whether or not they believe that money is being well spent.
Yeah, and Keir Starmer took the only line that a Prime Minister, I think, can realistically take. You can't rule out tax rises for the next 4 to 5 years. It is possible there will be another pandemic, there may be a war, there may be another unforeseen event. The real question is, where do those tax rises, if they are necessary, where do they fall? As someone on the left, I think that there are pretty grotesque wealth and income inequalities in this country at the moment. So if there are going to be taxes levied on a group of people at some point in the future, then I think it's imperative on a Labour government to say that they will be levied on the people who can bear those taxes.
But if you're talking about wealthy people in terms of people who earn a lot of income rather than multinational corporations, let's put them in a separate box, then those wealthy people who are earning a lot of income have already been taxed extortionately, some would say, under the last Conservative government, incredibly progressive regime. The top 1% of income earners now pay 28% of tax. That's the highest than ever before. Can you really squeeze any more out of that group of people?
Miriam, I've got the stats in front of me. The 5 richest families in the UK are richer than the poorest 20% of the population. The top 1% of households have 230 times the amount of wealth as the poorest 10% of households. Now, I'm not somebody who believes in punitive taxation. I don't say we should tax people just for the sake of it, tax people until the pips squeak. But actually, by international standards, by European standards, we're not actually that heavily taxed. Certainly by our own standards, historically, it's higher than it has been historically. But if you look at countries in Europe, it's not particularly high by their standards. And I believe that there is scope for upping the taxation, frankly, on the multinationals. Yeah, I'm absolutely in favour of going for the multinationals and the people who employ very clever accountants who create loopholes and help them get away with not evading tax, but avoiding tax. And the richest people in society, like, you know, some of the families and households that I just talked about there. And actually, you know, looking for example, a windfall tax from the banks. I mean, the banks have made mega profits as a result of the interest rate rises over the last couple of years. Unexpected excess profits. Why shouldn't we go to them for a few billion?
Yeah, I mean, that's right, isn't it, Charlie? There are people who can afford to pay more tax. But do you think there comes a point when actually it's a disincentive to work? You know, if you've got a marginal tax rate of 60%, let's say, as some people do, not necessarily the very wealthy, but people crossing tax bands, why would you do that extra shift at work if you only keep 40p of every pound?
Moreover, it's a disincentive to live here. Like, not just not to work, it's just why would you remain in this country if you're not going to get a fair day's pay, right? Because of taxation. It's just, you know, it's logical that you would leave. But this is the problem with the kind of... And the other thing about this topic, actually, about tax, that I don't see a lot of people ever talking about, is the more fundamental question about what this says about how our country has changed. Because I think that there is a world where if you have a cohesive, high-trust society where everybody feels they belong, where everybody feels a sense of shared identity, shared nationhood, belonging, taxation becomes, you know, there is a sense that it's your duty to pay tax. Because at the moment, we live in an economic environment where if you know, it's just understood in terms of profit and loss. If it's a net negative, I'm just going to leave.
Do you think, then, that actually the personal tax allowance, the amount of money you can earn before paying tax, is actually too high? Too many people are taken out of the tax system. Shouldn't we have a much, much lower rate of tax, let's say 5 or 10%, but make sure that more people pay tax so that they feel part of the system and they are contributing?
I don't disagree with that, but again, we first of all have to address the more fundamental issue of the fact that our nation doesn't really have much in the way of shared identity anymore, partly because of mass migration, but also because of, you know, I mean, house building is something we're going to talk about later on today. You look at the way this country looks now, the built environment of this country, it's not somewhere that people feel proud of. And Paul, you were talking about inequality, and I agree that perception of inequality at the ground level is hugely important, because if people feel that there are people who are kind of getting one over on them and who are not paying their fair share, I think that leads to a real feeling of resentment, and perhaps rightfully so, among those people. And all the while we have that kind of cultural and social environment, you know, this really, like, we're talking about issues that are downstream from that when we talk about
actually,
tax.
Charlie, it reduces economic performance as well.
Yeah.
So wider inequalities actually reduce economic performance.
Yeah.
So it's important, I think, for any nation, not just from the point of view of having a civilised, cohesive nation, but in terms of economic performance, to make sure that there aren't those hideous inequalities.
Yeah, one of the things we've seen in recent
social unrest.
Yeah, one of the things we've seen in recent days is the number of people on disability benefits, and the problem is that the differential between benefits and low-paid work is now so small that it's often not worth coming off those benefits. But just before we move on to the break, isn't the problem, though, in this country, and in fact in the whole of the West, that actually tax rises are not mostly due to government excess or waste? They're actually a function of an ageing population. We don't have enough people coming into the workforce. We've got lots and lots of people claiming pensions. I mean, aren't tax rises just absolutely inevitable unless we increase the birth rate?
Well, we need growth in the economy, Miriam. That's the key thing. We've had 15 years of stagnation in the economy, and until we get growth, until we create that prosperity, we create that extra wealth, where we get more buoyant tax revenue as a result of that, then we're going to have problems. And the only way we're going to get growth, I've said on this show before, is by investment. I mean, this idea from Rachel Reeves, if we can't afford it, we can't do it, I think is completely back to front. Actually, you will be able to afford it if you invest and you create growth in the economy and you improve productivity and you increase your tax revenues, then you can afford stuff. So she's rewritten John Maynard Keynes, and not in a very good way, frankly. This kind of fiscal straitjacket she's put herself into, I think, is likely potentially to lead to a recession. And
well, you have set us up perfectly for our next debate, because coming up, Labour have pledged a golden era of house building investment, promising 1.5 million new homes. But is it realistic? Don't go away.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Cryptocurrency entrepreneur Justin's son spent $6.2 million, £4.9 million, on a banana, duct taped to a wall, a piece of art by artist Mauricio Catalan. Other artwork has recently caused controversy. A portrait of the British computer scientist Alan Turing by the world's first ultra-realistic robot artist, that is to say ADAR, sold at auction for almost $1.1 million. Joining me now to talk about these latest hoo-has is art critic and mentor at the University of Arts London, Estelle Lovett. I have a feeling that in the case of the banana, it's quite a lot to do with the buyer. Now, you've researched the buyer a little bit. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Justin's son?
Yes, so he's a very wealthy cryptocurrency dealer. And of course, you know, everything now is AI and FTs, and it's the way that money's going, and it's very good publicity for him. So obviously, you know, he's not daft. But what makes this banana so unusual is, and it has, as you say, taken the art world by storm. It is the current spectacle, and what's amazing is that even during these very difficult times, the art market still manages to spend big on a significant fuss. Why has it created this fuss? Well, don't forget, the winning bid just happened in a matter of minutes. It took Justin's son minutes to beat 6 other rivals, so they've all got mega bucks in their pocket. But you know, it's conceptual art at its best.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got political commentator Charlie Downs and Paul Embry, trade unionist and broadcaster. Well, the Labour government is pledging to tackle NIMBYism and launch a golden age of house building as one of Sir Keir Starmer's 6 milestones announced yesterday.
Not just 1.5 million homes, but also 150 major infrastructure projects. And just as importantly, will send a very clear message to the NIMBYs, the regulators, the blockers, the bureaucrats, the alliance of naysayers, the people who say, no, Britain can't do this. We can't get things done in our country. Well, we say to them, you no longer have the upper hand. Britain says yes.
Wow, but the pledge has been met with criticism, some branding the target of 1.5 million homes by the end of Parliament as unrealistic. And in related news, the price of housing in the UK hit record highs last month. As Halifax reported, the average value of a UK home is now close to £300,000, up £5,000 just from the month before. So, are Keir Starmer's house building plans realistic, and will they reduce the cost of housing? Well, Paul, you were saying before the break that investment is exactly what the government needs to do. Is this the kind of thing that they should be doing? Yes, absolutely, but it should go further because I think it's a national emergency, housing at the moment. Millions of families can't get on or thousands of families can't get on the housing ladder. We've got a chronic shortage of housing, and yeah, he's absolutely right, I think. To take on the blockers and the bureaucrats. We need lots more homes in this country to address what I think is a very, very serious problem. And I often cite the post-war Labour government, which, led by Clement Attlee, built 1 million homes at a time when the country was being told we can't afford it, we're on our knees, we've just fought a war. And actually, thousands of families moved out of slum housing and into decent, usually council accommodation. And we don't do that anymore. We don't build council houses anymore because of the shortage. It has the impact of not just the fact that thousands of families can't get homes, but it just obviously pushes the prices up. So people when they are lucky enough to get a home and get a mortgage are often paying exorbitant rates. I mean, a recent study showed that families are spending something like 40% of their take-home pay. First-time buyers spending 40% of their take-home pay on mortgage repayments. Now, until you've got a situation where we do have a massive expansion of ideally council housing, but all sorts of housing, social housing, and whatever. And I think the Financial Times did a study where they said to keep pace with the rising population, we need to build something like 500,000 homes a year. So I think Starmer's right. He's hit on something. It is a key priority, but it doesn't go far enough. Well, that's right, Charlie. It doesn't go far enough, does it? And it sounds ambitious, but actually it's only 300,000 homes a year over the Parliament. And I think we've got the statistics of the number of houses that have been built over the last period of time. And actually, Conservatives managed about 220,000 houses a year. Here we go here, which obviously isn't enough, but it's not far short of what Starmer is proposing. Is this really going to make any difference?
OK, so I think there's a number of levels that have to be addressed when it comes to this conversation. So first of all, I am 23 years old. I'm getting married next year. I'm thinking about buying. Thank you very much. I'm thinking about buying a house. I'm looking at the market and I'm thinking, my gosh, how the heck am I ever going to afford to live in this country, to lay down roots and to own a piece of private property, which is an essential part of starting a family and having a stake in society, feeling, again, that sense of belonging that I was talking about before. So I look at that and I think, OK, well, what's the problem here? Why is it so expensive? One answer is we're not building enough houses. But the other is we've got too many people. Because the fact of the matter is that population isn't growing as a result of native birth rates. The birth rate of native British people is 1.5. This is not replacement rate. We have an ageing population. Therefore, the only population growth is coming from mass migration. We had nearly 1 million net people come in the year to 2023. And yet we only built 220,000 houses. Indeed. But why? Then that leads us on to the next point, which we have to ask, well, why exactly? Where I live in Kent, right? I live in sort of the rural-urban fringe, and I'm seeing the fields that I played in when I was a child be paved over to make way for these kind of IKEA-esque, flat-pack-looking, identical rows of houses, which have no soul, they have no aesthetic kind of depth to them. They just look like completely interchangeable. And again, these sound like trivial, superficial things, but they really aren't. Because if you want to have a sense of a nation, then you have to. There has to be a.
You can't underestimate the very real social problems that do occur when kids are being brought up in substandard accommodation.
It's one of the biggest indicators of educational performance, isn't it? But is it just supply? I mean, obviously there are a shortage of houses, especially in London and the South East. But we also have this crazy financialisation of the system where, because interest rates were so low for so long, people could just borrow more and more money. So you get foreign investors, particularly in London, just pushing up the price. And you get the sense that some of these house builders are just hanging on to the houses, releasing them little by little to keep the prices high. So if the same happens, will this even bring down the prices?
Well, the banks have got an extraordinary monopoly power, haven't they? Because they can essentially create money out of thin air and give it to people as a loan, as a mortgage, and simply flood in the market as they've been able to do, because no one seems to want to regulate them in this way, as just effectively applied a pair of bellows to the housing market and just pushed up prices to an astronomical level. So that absolutely needs to be dealt with. I think the banks need to be restrained in terms of their ability to essentially just create money out of nothing, give it to people, and as a result of that, pushing house prices up. But we can't underestimate too the population increase. Definitely, I mean, it would be disingenuous, whatever your politics.
It's just mathematical.
Of course, it's a reality, and it would be disingenuous, whatever your politics, to deny that has had an impact. But we do, I think, also need to look at things like family breakdown, because the truth is, where families quite often these days don't stick together. One parent will go one way and one parent will go the other. That itself creates much extra demand.
The average,
20, 30,
exactly. The average household size has decreased, which means you need more houses for the same amount of people. But Charlie, is this actually an argument for the state building social houses?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not against the concept of social housing. In a country like Britain, in the year 2024, we're a first world country, we should be leading the world in all areas, to be honest, but we aren't for various reasons, primarily idiotic leaders. But I don't think we should be having homeless people, British people, on the streets. Like you walk around London, I don't live in London, but I come here a lot for work. You walk around London, every time I come here, it seems like there's more and more homeless people around. That, to me, is a damning indictment of our society. We shouldn't have homeless people, right? And the way that you solve that problem is through things like social housing. So I'm completely in favour of the existence of social housing.
And also, it gets the banks out of the equation, and people can rent them at
and if I might, just very quickly, Rupert Lowe yesterday published some data that he'd written to the Commons about, and he has found that there were 33,075 non-UK lead tenants accessing social housing in the year to 2024. How crazy is that, right? This is foreigners, people not born in the UK, accessing social housing at the taxpayer's expense.
I was brought up on what was once the biggest municipal housing estate in the world, the Becontree Council Estate in Dagenham. And it's still, the estate is still there today. It was built in the 1920s and 1930s. Good, solid homes, spacious, front gardens, back gardens, much better in many respects than the private sort of shoe boxes that are thrown up today. And there was a real kind of sense of belonging. There was a sense of community about the whole place, and I wouldn't have swapped it for the world. I think the stability that gives kids, being able to be brought up with their parents in an affordable but good standard home, I think sets their trajectory for many of them for the rest of their lives. And I think we've turned a blind eye to that. And I think we've created a huge number of social problems because we haven't grasped it.
Indeed. Well, we'll have more on that soon, because coming up, is Reform UK more popular than Labour? According to a new poll, they are. We'll be digging into that shortly, so don't go anywhere.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Dara is expected to bring heavy outbreaks of rain and some severe gales at times as we head into the weekend. Hail snow too for Scotland, and there are multiple Met Office warnings in force, so do stay up to date on our website for those. This is Storm Dara here out to the west, bringing in heavy outbreaks of rain alongside these frontal systems and a good squeeze in the Isobars, so very strong winds at times across the bulk of the country, particularly around western coasts. These outbreaks of rain are set to continue overnight, still falling as snow across high ground in Scotland, and we're really going to see those winds strengthen in western areas overnight too, particularly in western parts of Wales, where we do have a red Met Office wind warning in force too. We could see gusts here reaching around 80 to 90 miles per hour. So for the start of Saturday then, it's going to be a very wet start across a lot of the country. Scotland seeing outbreaks of rain, still some hill snow across higher ground as well. And similar across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland, heavy outbreaks of rain and very strong winds, particularly around coastal areas, but even inland areas seeing some very strong gusts at times. Western parts of Wales likely to see severe gales here at times, making very difficult driving conditions. And on the whole, through Saturday, there is likely to be disruption as a result of the storm. The heavy outbreaks of rain continuing. Still a very windy day across a large portion of the country, particularly around western coasts. And looking at the temperatures too later on, we can see highs generally between 9 to 10 Celsius, but in those very, very strong winds as well. That's really going to add on to the wind chill, so it is going to feel a very chilly day, particularly under the rain and in those strong winds. Through into Sunday, we do start to see the weather settle down slightly. We do have some outbreaks of rain still, particularly in eastern areas, a few showers feeding into eastern parts of Scotland. The best of the weather, or the driest and brightest of the weather, across Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. But it's still going to be a very blustery day on offer, and we won't really see more settled conditions until we head into next week. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Staffordshire tonight, I'm afraid, at Burton-upon-Trent, where Derby Road is partly blocked northbound at the Derby Turn roundabout and the scene of an accident. Problems heading south of Cambridge into Essex, down the M11 from junction 10 to 9 towards Saffron Walden. There's been an accident blocking off the inside lane once. Bear in mind if you're heading further down towards Stansted. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, one lane shut northbound 11A to 12, just north of Dunstable, where a car's broken down further south on the M1 northbound. A lane is shut from 9 to 10 towards Luton following an accident, and the M23 down to a single lane northbound in West Sussex just north of Gatwick following a multi-vehicle crash. And in Hampshire north of Winchester, the A34 is closed northbound from the M3 up the Winchester bypass due to an ongoing incident. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got Charlie Downs, political commentator, and Paul Embry, trade unionist and broadcaster. And you've been getting in touch with your views, particularly about tax rises. Will he or won't he? Ju says maybe they should just close the loopholes. Yes, very good. We were talking about how people with lots of wealth can employ accountants to get out of tax. Christina says, Starmer praises the civil servants, the people who take the private sector money to stay at home. We should reduce the number of civil servants. Well, that would surely save some money. And then we've got some comments about house buildings. Tim says, what happens to all the AI and robots that are going to replace our jobs? We were supposed to be needing fewer people in the future. Well, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you can actually build houses off-site now, can't you? And then with robots, and then bring them in, and that makes it a lot quicker. So maybe we'll see some of that towards the 1.5 million target. Well, let's move on to politics. A new poll suggests that Nigel Farage's Reform UK has overtaken Labour for the first time. The research from polling company Find Out Now gives Reform 24% of the vote, 1 point ahead of Labour, who are on 23%, and 2 points behind the Conservatives on 26%. So that means if a general election was held today, this poll could translate into 95 MPs in Parliament for Reform. Here's what Reform Chairman Zia Youssef said in response to that poll earlier today on GB News.
What's happening across the country is that the British people are realising that there is now a real viable alternative to the same two old parties. For the first time in a century in the UK, we are seeing the stranglehold of the two old parties start to slip. We have effectively a three-way dead heat in British politics now. And this is remarkable because, remember, before the last general election, just 6 months ago, Reform had 0 MPs. Today, Reform, of course, have 5 brilliant MPs, and they do a far better job than the 121 Tory MPs of holding this dystopian Keir Starmer government to account.
Well, Nigel Farage, the Reform Party leader, has tweeted that they're just getting started. So, is he right? Can Reform break through Britain's two-party system? And should Labour or the Conservatives be more concerned? Charlie, this is unprecedented, certainly in modern times, that two parties are occupying what might be quite similar ground. And actually, the next election could be a disaster for the right if they do continue to compete.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, this is the point that I see people missing, because as exciting as it is that Reform are polling so well in this one poll, you know, I've supported Reform for a couple of years. I think that they are possibly the only vehicle that real, you know, conservative-minded, traditional-minded people actually have in British politics. But with that being said, the Conservative Party is still beating them, right? And that should not be happening, because they are led by an incredibly weak leader in Kemi Badenoch, and the rhetorical and political space that they should be occupying.
But the only group that they're leading is amongst the over 65s, who possibly are, you know, loyal and always have been. So, you know, that may change over time.
Maybe so. But I think it does speak to a certain appetite among the electorate for more from Reform, because this is certainly how I feel. Again, I want to see them do well, but I also think that they're leaving a lot of, you know, metaphorically speaking, a lot of money on the table. You know, there is an open goal sitting, waiting for them when it comes to things, you know, I mean, you know, there's been real disappointing rhetoric coming out of them on things like Islam, on things like deportation of illegals, on things like demographics. These are areas of policy and conversation that Reform should absolutely be dominating. Because if you look at their analogues on the continent, the National Rally in France, the AfD in Germany, they, every single day, they hit it. They leave no room for the establishment parties to make any ground. But Reform, I think, are still yet to kind of reach that level. Maybe they're playing it safe, I don't know. But
well, is that open goal, Paul, Labour voters? Is that who they're going to pick off next? And have they got a good chance?
I'd be a bit worried if I were Keir Starmer. It's early days, but we could be seeing another realignment in British politics. I wouldn't rule that out. They polled well at the general election in a lot of red wall constituencies. Labour's vote amongst the C2DEs, which is the occupational working class, did not rise in this election this year compared to 2019. They did a lot better, obviously, overall, but their vote among the C2DEs did not rise, and I think a lot of those people would be seen by Reform as fertile territory. Because, as I said, they did do well and came second in a lot of red wall constituencies. So unless Starmer gets a grip on, I think, three key issues, he needs to get growth in the economy, he needs to make working class people feel better off, get more disposable income in their pockets, get NHS waiting lists down. The NHS is broken, there's no question about it. We're seeing record waiting lists. That concerns people. They need to be driven down. And immigration, the immigration and asylum system is absolutely broken. And until he gets a grip on that and shows that he has got the wherewithal and the nous to be able to get a grip on the borders and to reduce the numbers, and he's talking a good game at the moment. He did the big set-piece media conference the other day where he talks about the Tories running an open borders experiment and all the rest of it. Well, it's great in terms of rhetoric, but what people are interested in is results, not because they're anti-immigration, but because we cannot sustain a situation like we've got at the moment.
But is there a problem that, you know, and I've got every respect for anybody who ever stands for election, because it's hard. So I respect Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, you know, he's been elected. But in a media age, he does suffer from a lack of charisma, which, let's face it, Nigel Farage does not. Is he going to struggle to gain in popularity when actually there's this upstart party that's gaining that kind of traction amongst working class voters, like you say?
He does lack charisma, and that's an important thing in today's politics, but it's not the be-all and end-all, I don't think. I think often people overstate the importance of it. If you're getting results, if you're delivering on people's key priorities, then I think they will forgive you being a little bit wooden and not being, you know, the brightest spark at the party. So I don't think that is necessarily his big issue. I talked about Clement Attlee earlier. Well, he was regarded as this really kind of drab, monosyllabic figure, and he went up against Churchill, don't forget, who was a lion.
But that was in a different age, when most people didn't even know what their politicians looked like.
I get that, but in principle, you had two completely different personalities. You had the great personality that Churchill was the war leader, and Attlee is this sort of boring figure. But he won the landslide for the Labour Party and delivered for people. So from Starmer's point of view, of course, it's a different age, social media and all the rest of it. I get that completely. But if you deliver on people's priorities, as I say, they will set aside the things that you're not particularly good at, which is speaking, you know, and having charisma and things like that.
Now, Charlie, you said that there's room for Reform to grow, perhaps go even higher in the polls. But do you think as they become a more established party, they will face similar problems to the Conservative Party, which is that they've got to decide what they believe on certain issues? Now, we know what they think about net zero and we know what they think about immigration, but what's their tax policy? What's their health policy? What are their social policies? They were completely split on assisted assisted suicide, much more split than any other party.
Well, this is crucial because on the other end of this, whilst Keir Starmer might not have any charisma, it's true that Nigel Farage and others in Reform, Rupert Lowe I think is especially good, they are charismatic, but when it comes to substance, we're seeing a lot of people still saying, well, where do you actually stand on a lot of these things? Because you can't be all things to all men. If you want to go from being an insurgent party to a potential party of government, there has to be a level of seriousness that I think a lot of people are still kind of waiting for when it comes to Reform. Because you're right, we don't know where they stand on a lot of different issues. And as effective a leader as Nigel Farage is when it comes to winning an election, if you listen to Tony Blair of all people, he always says this. He says the skill set required before an election is totally different to the skill set required after an election. Because after the election, you're dealing with the nuts and bolts of politics, the day-to-day business of leadership. And I think Reform is still adjusting to that.
Yeah.
The problem for Starmer is if that sink in the polls becomes a trend, because they have sunk quite substantially since the election, you know, in terms of the popularity, there's no doubt about that. If it becomes a trend, that's when it becomes a problem. I mean, the Tories, for example, they won the 92 general election in the spring, and then we had Black Wednesday in the September, where we crashed out of the ERM and interest rates shot up and so on. And at that point, I think there was no way back for the Tories. Whatever they did, and then we had the recovery the next year, and by the time of the 97 general election, the economy was in a pretty good state. But I think the die was cast because people remembered that, and from there on in, the Tories were never going to win. And I think the danger for Starmer is if the sort of unpopularity, levels of unpopularity that he's experiencing at the moment continue, which they may do, it then becomes very difficult to break that. It was a loveless landslide.
Yes, it certainly was. I think only 1 in 5 adults actually voted Labour once you account for the low turnout. But what Starmer does have in his favour is the first past the post. And if we get to the next election and the vote to the right is evenly split between the Conservatives and Reform, which it could easily be, then even a very unpopular Labour Party on 25% of the vote could still come through the middle and be the biggest party in Parliament.
Yeah, well, there's two interesting things to say here. The first is, you know, this speaks to perhaps the need for Reform and the Conservative Party to have a chat. Right? And to maybe come up with some kind of strategy where that doesn't happen. Because that would be disastrous for the country. And if the country is what we care about here, then surely that has to happen. The second thing is, you know, it's interesting how Reform... I think I've actually lost my train of thought there. That's very embarrassing. Sorry.
Well, but I think one issue, though, with the potential pact is that although Reform and Conservatives may occupy similar ground on a policy, certainly my experience of knocking on doors was that there are plenty of Reform voters who say, I wouldn't vote Conservative over my dead body, and plenty of Conservative voters who would never vote Reform over their dead body. So any kind of no-stand pact is going to be quite difficult to sell.
That's true, but I think they can sell it, because when we again put aside these petty differences and say, you know, the interests of the nation and what we are prioritising here, then that's good. The point that I was going to make is Labour was, as you said, it was a loveless landslide, right? People were voting Labour as an anti-Tory vote. I don't think many people really realised what we would get with this Labour government. But I think a lot of people who are swinging to Reform, it's actually a similar kind of thing. It's more of an anti-Labour vote and also an anti-Tory vote than it is a pro-Reform vote. And again, that comes as a result of the lack of substance at this stage. And again, I think we will see more people go to Reform if they capture that rhetorical and political ground that as I say, I think they're leaving on the table at the moment.
Could be Reform play a similar role traditionally to the Lib Dems when it comes to sort of mid-term in the Parliament, where the Lib Dems always do brilliantly at by-elections, and everyone says this is the bright new dawn for the Lib Dems, and they're on their way to government and so on. And it never works, of course. No. It never happens like that. They're very much a protest vote between elections, and it could be that Reformer seen as that way, that people are really angry. Not just Tory voters, but Labour voters as well, and say, actually, this guy Farage, he's saying the right things. But when it comes to a general election, they say, do I actually want these people in charge of the country? That's when the real test.
Well, I remember when they all said, I agree with Nick Clegg. That used to be the refrain. That seems a long time ago. Anyway, coming up, a new weight loss jab could be available on the NHS, but only to a fraction of those patients who are eligible for the treatment. Is this a false economy, or should we expect people to take more responsibility for their own health? Don't go away.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now we're joined now by Sophia Varaji, the co-founder of the Azealia Foundation, which was created due to the tragic passing of her 8-month-old daughter to leukemia. The foundation is doing some incredible work for children's cancer.
Yeah, some really incredible stuff. They've just launched a PhD even where they're funding young doctors to specialise in childhood cancer as, get this, I wasn't aware of this, it's one of the most underfunded areas in the NHS. So not many sectors choose to go down that route, unfortunately. The charity, the foundation, have donated over £1 million worth of equipment to hospitals as well, and we're delighted to welcome Sophia. You've turned a tragedy and grief into triumph, I guess, and something so inspiring. Just tell us about that. Do you recognise that in yourself and the work you're doing?
Yeah, I'm here to always honour my daughter and to always continue her name, her legacy, and to support all of these other children fighting against childhood cancer.
It was all over social media. I mean, you were, at one point, probably one of the most famous families in this country because of Azalea and Azalea's fight. When you look back now at that time, does it give you comfort that you had so many people behind you?
Absolutely. The community that we have got, the humanity that we've seen in the UK and all around the world, in fact, has really touched my heart, and that kindness, love and support has always been the backbone of carrying me through this, to give me hope, to give me belief, and it still inspires me and encourages me till today to continue to do that, to show that light, to show that courage and bravery.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got Charlie Downs, political commentator, and Paul Embry, trade unionist and broadcaster. Now, a new weight loss jab, Mounjaro, will be available on the NHS in England from March, but it could take up to 12 years for everyone who is eligible to benefit. NHS representatives have said that they're worried the health service will be overwhelmed by demand for the jab. Now, 3.4 million people are thought to be eligible for it, but just 220,000 patients will be given the drug as part of the initial rollout. So is this a missed opportunity to cut down on the huge costs of obesity, or should we expect people to take more responsibility for their health? Charlie, where do you stand on this? Should we be giving everybody who's obese this jab and just letting them get on with it, or is there more to it than that?
Well, I mean, of course there's more to it than that. Again, this is another one of these issues where we are treating symptoms and not causes, because there has to be a conversation about the fact that the quality of our food in the West has deteriorated massively over the last few decades. You know, if you look, and we've been talking today about the role of the state and the role of the government. I think there is maybe, only a handful of issues more important for the government to ensure than that affordable, high-quality food is available for as many people as possible, because the knock-on effects that has on things like IQ, on things like just, life expectancy, well-being, it's huge. But we have, gotten into this situation, again, I think partly because of the economic system we live under, where the shelves of the supermarkets are heaving with these food-like substances. But if you read the ingredient list, it's just slop. It's like fake chemical stuff. And most people are eating this stuff. And and you can't blame them because it's affordable. But there is a more fundamental issue here. And I think if we don't address that, then this is not going to get any better. And if we treat the symptoms in this kind of superficial way using these treatments that we're talking about, I think it's actually only going to get worse.
But should we not do both, Paul? Address what our kids are eating and, crack down on some of the companies that are just pumping out these chemicals, but also act on obesity, even if it's just to save money for the NHS?
We absolutely should act on obesity because it's a serious issue, and I'm not an anti-jabber by instinct, if you like. I'm not kind of anti-vaccine and stuff like that. But I am actually quite uneasy about the idea of a medical intervention to address what is ultimately, you know, a social stroke cultural issue. You know, it's something that can be resolved, for maybe not for everybody, but for most people through a much better diet and through exercise. And it seems to me that this is almost, you know, a shortcut to addressing something that should be addressed through those two things, through better diet and better exercise.
And inevitably, Paul, this will become an industry, and that's the dark thing about it, is there is an incentive there for, you know, to keep the population.
Well, the manufacturers came out today and pressured the government and were saying, look, we can help you, we can help you drive down obesity.
This is the problem with the pharmaceutical industry, is it incentivises poor health, because that's how they make their money. And again, we have to look at the, you know, the companies that our politicians are taking money from, you know, not naming any names, but there has to be some kind of conversation about that as well.
But is this also the legacy of having a health system that is free at the point of use? And I know we're all very attached to that, but actually people don't understand the cost of healthcare, because it doesn't matter what you do to your body or how poor your lifestyle is, you will get free treatment. Now, I'm not arguing for a privatised system, but on the other hand, at the moment, there is no cost. I mean, imagine you have a car and you don't look after it and the state will service it for you anyway.
I don't think so, Miriam, because I think we've had healthcare free at the point of use since the end of the Second World War. The Attlee government, let me just get that in again, when they created the National Health Service. You should write a book about it. The Labour government created the National Health Service. And so it's been free at the point of use since then. But if you look, and funnily enough, I was looking at an old cine film the other day. My granddad had a cine camera back in the 1960s. And I was looking at one of the old cine films, and it was taken in the 1960s. It was at a holiday camp. Everybody was thin. Everybody was thin, and everybody looked quite fit. And I imagine their diet was better. They didn't have kids who were just sitting and staring at computers or smartphones all day. They were going out on their bikes. They were even in the 80s when I was growing up, it was a similar sort of thing. So I don't think it is as easy as just simply saying, oh, people are just relying on the NHS to help them lose weight if they ever get it. It's very much a cultural thing.
But there's no disincentive to be fat. Well, there is amongst certain social groups. I mean, you know, rich people are skinny, let's be honest. There's a big differential. But, you know, some countries have done successful things. Japan, for example, brought in a law where if you don't lose weight, your employer gets fined. I mean, it sounds insane. You know, could you do that here? But
that's the end of their sumo wrestling industry.
Well, yeah, but the average BMI in Japan is 23. You know, so yeah,
that's hilarious.
Maybe there are exceptions, carve-outs if you're a sumo wrestler. I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, there was a time. Look, let's just be real here. There was a time where there was a social stigma around being overweight, right? And perhaps rightfully so, because it does make you more of a burden on the people around you. It's not good for your own health and all of this. But again, for me, this comes back, like some of the other issues that we've spoken about today, to a sense of society and a sense of shared identity. Because if we have a nationalised healthcare system, which I'm in favour of, I don't like this kind of American attitude where it is, oh, if my neighbour gets cancer, that's his problem. It's nothing to do with me. Actually, that's your countryman. Like, what kind of an attitude is that? But if we had a sense that it was your duty to be healthy, right, this is key, then I think that a lot of these issues would go away, because there wouldn't be this sense that, oh, it's fine, I'll just use the NHS, it's free. Because actually, if it's your duty to be healthy, then...
But exactly, but how do you introduce that duty?
Well, I think part of it is education. I think there needs to be a far more intense focus on physical health in education. I think that young people, children should be, you know, I think a third of their time should be spent outside. I think a third of their time should be spent on the pitch, right? Because it's good for you, it's good for your character, gives you a sense of... I think it teaches you about life, you know? I play a lot of sports, and it really does give you a set of values that you don't have if you don't.
Character building.
It's funny how in these days when we obsess about people's health and mental health and this culture of safetyism, that actually obesity is almost like a taboo. You're not allowed to say to somebody, or it's frowned upon if you say to someone, you know, actually you're overweight and you need to address that because it has health impacts and it can have knock-on effects on their family and so on. I think the ad industry has got a bit to answer for as well. When you look at the ad industry, essentially, you know, parading people who are quite heavily overweight in some...
Beautiful at any size.
And kind of saying, it's any size, it takes all sorts of... I do get why they're doing doing it because they want to be inclusive and all the rest of it. But you also have to think, well, is it wise to send a message that it's fine to be obese? Because it isn't.
No.
It's not.
And I think some parents are even frightened to raise it with their own children because they've been warned that you might damage your child's mental health. It's actually what they really need is for the parent to help them lose weight.
It's this like mind poison of egalitarianism that we have that pervades every area of life in the West, where it's like you can't draw a value or qualitative differential between two lifestyles because you might upset somebody and you might affect their mental health and whatever else. No, it is better to be fit. That shouldn't be a controversial
I think also there have been big cultural changes that aren't just ultra-processed foods. So, for example, I remember my mum saying that when she was a child, it was not the done thing to eat on the move. You know, you didn't eat in the street, and now we do that all the time. We have cafe culture now, which is kind of nice, but when you go into Costa Coffee and you see that the best cake for you is 450 calories, I mean, you know, just our culture's changed very much.
I think this is going to sound terribly sort of conservative of me, but I think there is. I think there is an absence of self-restraint generally, not just when it comes to food, but people. I think we live in quite a selfish age where people want kind of instant gratification and then challenge anyone who says that might not be good for you because it's about me and it's about my individualism and my body is sovereign. I've got the right to do what I want to do, which is why I think drug culture has proliferated so much. So I think there absolutely are wider socio-cultural issues at play.
Let's make the virtues great again.
Indeed, yes, I mean, none of this should be controversial, but the fact that we live in a culture that demonises these kinds of positions, where we do say it's better to be fit than not fit, it's good to have self-control and self-restraint, discipline is a virtue. The fact that those are coded as conservative and not just common sense.
Well, I think we're so frightened of criticising anyone now because we don't want to emotionally harm them, but actually it's often the best thing to hear that kind of tough love, and then you can change your behaviour.
And frankly, parents should kick their children out of the house. When they're spending hours, and I've got 2 kids, I know how easy it is just to think, oh, they're up in their bedroom, leave them alone. Actually, you should kick them out of the house and you should say to them, go and knock on your friend's door, go over the park, go and take a bike out, because those experiences are nice memory banks to build anyway, I think, for the future.
You don't see that. You don't see that anymore,
It's much better emotionally and physical for children to have that interaction with other kids outside of the home. Better for their physical fitness, better for their emotional fitness.
More sport in school too. I know a lot of primary schools, oh, it's raining today, we can't do PE. Maybe there should be a legal requirement for an hour a day.
Well, again, you look at, like you were saying about the films that you were watching from the 60s, was it? You know, you look at footage out of like America, for example, old, you know, physical education classes. All of the, they're doing pull-ups, they're climbing ropes, they're running in the field, all this sort of thing. You don't see that sort of thing anymore. It's a very flattened, very kind of sterile kind of physical education we have now, and I don't think it really does the job.
Well, kick your kids out the house, don't let them eat junk food, and let's get healthy again. Well, thank you so much to both my panel for an excellent show. Thank you so much for watching. Michelle will be back next week, so please do join us. You've been watching Jeeves & Co. on GB News with me, Miriam Cates.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Dara is expected to bring heavy outbreaks of rain and some severe gales at times as we head into the weekend. Hail snow too for Scotland, and there are multiple Met Office warnings in force, so do stay up to date on our website for those. This is Storm Dara here out to the west, bringing in heavy outbreaks of rain alongside these frontal systems and a good squeeze in the isobars, so very strong winds at times across the bulk of the country, particularly around western coasts. These outbreaks of rain are set to continue overnight, still falling as snow across high ground in Scotland, and we're really going to see those winds strengthen in western areas overnight too, particularly in western parts of Wales where we do have a red Met Office wind warning in force too. We could see gusts here reaching around 80 to 90 miles per hour. So for the start of Saturday then, it's going to be a very wet start across a lot of the country. Scotland seeing outbreaks of rain, still some hill snow across higher ground as well. And similar across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland, heavy outbreaks of rain and very strong winds, particularly around coastal areas, but even inland areas seeing some very strong gusts at times. Western parts of Wales likely to see severe gales here at times, making very difficult driving conditions. And on the whole through Saturday, there is likely to be disruption as a result of the storm. The heavy heavy outbreaks of rain continuing. Still a very windy day across a large portion of the country, particularly around western coasts. And looking at the temperatures too later on, we can see highs generally between 9 to 10 Celsius, but in those very, very strong winds as well. That's really going to add on to the wind chill, so it is going to feel a very chilly day, particularly under the rain and in those strong winds. Through into Sunday, we do start to see the weather settle down slightly. We do have some outbreaks of rain still, particularly in eastern areas, a few showers feeding into eastern parts of Scotland. The best of the weather, or the driest and brightest of the weather across Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. But it's still going to be a very blustery day on offer, and we won't really see more settled conditions until we head into next week. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays on the M6 in Staffordshire. The inside lane remains closed southbound from junction 13 to 12, heading south of Stafford after a lorry broke down. On the M42, just over the border in the West Midlands, there are long southbound queues to junction 5. The Solihull bypass, 2 cars were involved in an accident. All lanes are back open, but it's still queuing back to junction 6, the Birmingham Airport turn-off. Long delays heading south of Cambridge into Essex down the M11, 1 lane shut, junction 10 to 9 following an accident. On the Essex stretch of the M25, the inside lane's blocked clockwise at just before junction 28 at the A12 at the scene of an accident. The M23 in West Sussex down to a single lane northbound just north of Gatwick following a multi-vehicle crash, causing long queues back onto the M23 spur towards the airport as well. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For your chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World. Tonight on the show, we've got the IEA Communications Manager, that's Reem Ibrahim. Also got former Labour MP Stephen Pound, he's back on the show for about the 10th time. We're going back in the day with housing specialist Charlie Lamdin. We've got former Apprentice star Ryan Mark Parsons. But first, let's go to the news.
Very good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill with your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom.
Our top story this evening, Storm Dara has sparked a rare red warning for wind, with gusts of up to 90 miles an hour expected to batter parts of Wales and the southwest of England, including Cardiff, Bristol and Devon. The warning, in place from 3 a.m. tomorrow, calls for people to take care, as flying debris and falling trees could pose a danger to life. An amber warning is also in place for the west coast of the UK, from Scotland to Cornwall, and Northern Ireland, with large waves and potential damage to homes and buildings. Heavy rain and over 100 flood warnings are also in effect, adding to the weekend's challenges. Now, in Scotland, a farm has been placed under lockdown after a cow tested positive for atypical mad cow disease. The Scottish Government has imposed strict movement restrictions on affected animals, although it says there is no risk to public health and the cow didn't enter the food chain. The case in Dumfries and Galloway was detected through routine surveillance, and investigations are now underway to determine its origin. Authorities have assured the public that stringent control measures are in place to prevent any wider impact. And the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has signed a controversial trade deal with South American countries, which could have a significant impact on farmers in the UK. The deal has been met with firm opposition from several EU member states and is expected to face a backlash from the farming sector across Europe, with a significant impact in Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. European farmers have consistently protested against the EU-Mercosur deal, arguing it could lead to cheap imports of South American foods, especially beef, which they claim does not meet the EU's environmental and food safety standards. And the Princess of Wales has made a rare public appearance with her family at Westminster Abbey for her annual Christmas carol service this evening. The royal couple walked into the historic Abbey, where they married in 2011, with their children, who stopped at the kindness tree to hang messages on its branches in dedication to someone who has supported them during their lives. This year's Together at Christmas event celebrates love and empathy, with 1,600 guests invited. In a message sent ahead of the service, Kate said Christmas is a moment of celebration and joy, as well as an opportunity to slow down and reflect on things that connect us all. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World. I'm Lee Anderson, the Reform UK Member of Parliament for Ashfield, and joining him tonight we've got Reem Ibrahim, who is the Communications Manager of the IEA, and he's back. He's been released from the care home, the crusty old left in the corner.
I'm still tagged.
It's Stephen Pound, he's got a tag on. Listen, we're going to talk about immigration numbers. They were out last week. Absolutely astonishing figures, unbelievable figures. The Tories were bad on immigration. Labour before them was bad on immigration. Nobody out there on the street in the real world actually believes any party now when they say they're going to control immigration. What is it, Stephen, about our political parties, the establishment, Parliament, when it comes to immigration? You just don't get it.
Well, Lee, you said it's unbelievable. For me, it's all too believable.
Yeah.
The reality is we're talking about 20,000 people now since July of this year. Now, OK, you can say that the weather's been very good and everything.
Yeah, but that's illegal migration, Stephen.
Exactly so. Look, you look back to America, we're now talking about mass deportations in America. When Eisenhower deported over 1 million people in the 50s, do you know what he did? He actually shaved their heads so they wouldn't come back in again. Now, that's sort of real hardcore, a thing called Operation Wetback I made. I just don't think this country is ready for that. People say, we don't like it, but when you say, what would you do about it? I think what we have to do, Lee, is to process those people who come here. We're not going to send people back to Afghanistan and Iran, and let's get them paying taxes. But in all honesty, mate, single men from Albania, they should be back on the boat and they should be turned around so they're going through a flipping revolving door.
I think we're having different conversations here. Just started on legal migration,
Yes.
which is like a million, net million people coming into the country.
Yes.
Unbelievable figures.
Yeah, so last week we saw the immigration statistics come out and we found out that under the Tories, over the last year, we've seen net migration hit almost 1 million. almost 1 million. This country cannot handle those numbers. Now, I'm somebody that's from a North African background. I think that immigration is generally quite good for the country. It's good for the economy when it's the right kinds of people and when it's people that are actually incentivised to work. Unfortunately, the current system incentivises people to get lost in the benefit system, get lost into effectively being reliant on taxpayer money, and it's so unfair. How is it that we have hard-working, often British taxpayers footing the bill for benefits from many, many people that have just arrived on boats? And it's absolutely unacceptable.
She's right though, Stephen, isn't she? The benefit bill for people not born in this country is absolutely astronomical. And that's not fair on the British taxpayer.
No, look, I think, Lee, you're absolutely right to differentiate between the people on the boats and the so-called legal migration. When I was an MP, and you probably had the same thing, remember somebody would come over here as a care worker, and next thing you know, they'd apply for family reunion, and you have 17 or 18 members of the family. Now, fair play, the Conservatives actually have stopped that, or they certainly dialed down on that, and I hope that we can do the same thing now with the new government. But the reality is that a lot of immigrants to this country give a huge amount. They're entrepreneurial, they're very active, they're very hardworking, and they're pretty desperate in many cases. But the fact is, at the moment, the balance is wrong.
I think it's true that many, many migrants that come to this country do contribute and do work hard. But when you actually look into those statistics a little bit more, rather than just looking at the oversight, what you actually find out is that it's migrants from particular countries that contribute more than others. So we know, for example, that migrants from a North African and Middle Eastern background, where I'm from, tend to actually not contribute more in tax revenue than they actually take out in the system. We've got to be very clear about this. We need to solve the housing crisis. We need to be building more homes. We've got about 4 million missing homes, and that was a failure of both the Conservatives and clearly now the Labour government as well. But at the same time, we need to ensure that public services are able to actually catch up. Until we do all of those things, we cannot be taking on this many people.
Let's go back to my original point, Stephen. What is it about governments in this country, whether it's Labour or Conservative, that they just do not get how the public feel on mass migration? Why don't they understand?
Lee, let's be honest. The last election in July elected 5 Reform UK members of Parliament. Now, we can argue whether what the basis for that election was, but I should say one of the main factors is a feeling that the government is not listening to the people. And of that, the third rail, the one that you touch at your peril, is immigration. So I think whether if there's a sort of intrinsic fear of just talking about it in the civil service or not, the reality is that you guys are coming down the track like a railway train, and people have got to start listening. Now, that's the easy bit. The hard bit is what we do about it, how we actually deal with it, because we can't put the Royal Navy across the channel. We've got to start processing and dealing with these people, and we've got to get the Home Office, which is utterly unfit for purpose. It's a sclerotic organisation. We've got to get that. Lee, you probably found the same thing.
Stephen, I'm sorry, but it's excellent for you to be talking about this, but the fact that the majority of people on the left absolutely do not care about this, and the fact that over the last few years, now they are starting to talk about it. I'm not being funny, but so many people on the right have been talking about this for years, and it's people like Stephen, not you necessarily, but people on the left.
I'll go with him.
I'm going with Stephen, that have been saying that if you are restrictive on immigration, if you think that immigration is a problem in this country, you are a racist. You are not allowed to talk about it.
Let me be blunt here, Stephen.
I would never say that in 100 years.
When I was in the Labour Party, I used to hear all these Labour MPs and councillors and Labour Party members saying, oh, isn't migration such a great thing? It enriches our culture, which it may be, but the economic benefits are fantastic. And they're not like you just said, Stephen. You can have a care worker come from Central Africa. 5 or 6 kids we've done.
Lee, I've never heard anybody say in the generality immigration is a good thing. What I've heard a lot of people, I'm from West London, and we had the huge Irish community in West London. Now we've got the big Sikh community, we've got Syrians, we've got Iraqis, we've got Tamils. And what people say on an individual basis, they're fine. But the problem is, and as Reem said, it's the sheer numbers. And I think that is the issue nowadays. We're a pretty small island. We've got a population of over 60 million. How much longer can we go on?
Keir Starmer refuses to talk about this issue.
This is the point, right? He had a speech this week and immigration wasn't mentioned. The point is that we talk about immigration as though it is this kind of silver bullet. If we were to restrict it, then everything will be fine. That's not the case at all. The government itself has failed on immigration, but the real problem is that we haven't been able to build services that are able to catch up to it. even if we stop immigration, cut it to zero migration tomorrow, we will still need so much more. And ultimately, we've got the highest tax burden since the Second World War. We're taxing young people so significantly in order to foot the bill for millions of people that come over this country today. It is unfair. And ultimately, I see many of these younger people that want to actually leave the country altogether because they say, this country does not care about me.
Did you see that 2 weeks ago, 600 people were deported, illegal overstayers deported to Brazil? We've also had an operation in Germany where we found the people from China who are providing these dinghies and these rigid inflatable boats.
There are some things happening. This is a contract by the Labour Party. The 9,400 people they deported since they came into power in July are not people that came over on small boats. These are overstayers that's been here 10, 20 years. They sort of dressing this up in the House of Commons, like Sir Keir did yesterday, as if we're deporting these people that's come over on boats, and they're not, Stephen.
The point is that people that come over on boats are actually a very, very, very small percentage of migration. So we saw figures from last week.
They cost a lot of money.
They cost a huge amount of money. They're very small. The majority of illegal immigration is actually coming from people that are overstaying their visas, or they come legally. So they come on a plane, for example, on a tourist visa, and they overstay and then claim asylum when they get here. Clearly, there is an incentive for people to want to come here and claim asylum. Why do they leave France? Why do they leave a safe country?
Good question.
Because here, we give them freebies that are when British taxpayers that foot the bill.
Let's put that question to our left in the corner. Stephen, why are they leaving France, a so-called safe country, to come to this country?
Because don't forget, benefits in France are actually a lot higher than they are in this country. They're coming here mostly because of language and because of family connections. But look, the reality
benefits are unequivocally a part of it. We have one of the most generous benefit systems in all of Europe.
German benefits are much higher. French benefits are much higher. Italian benefits are much
higher. That's the point. In Germany, they are much more restrictive about who actually gets those benefits.
Oh, they are now.
In this country, we give it out willy-nilly to whoever comes here and wants it.
Angela Merkel said, "Come one, come all."
She might have said that, but if you talk about the actual statistics about what people get, we spend huge amounts of money on the welfare state, huge amounts of money on benefits.
Not nearly as much as they do in Germany and France.
Per person, per capita, or to all those particular people.
But Stephen, we see Sir Keir Starmer bleating on about the 9,400 deported since July. We've seen the immigration minister say the same thing in the House on many occasions. Yet these are the people who signed a letter 2-3 years ago, in December, I think it was 2020 or 2021, to stop murderous, rapists, child sex offenders being deported to their country of origin.
No,
why is that, Stephen?
Lee, that's actually not the case.
It is the case, Stephen.
What they said was, in those particular cases, that the British law should apply.
But can you see the hypocrisy there, Reem, with the Labour Party?
It's incredibly hypocritical. I think that the most important point to make here, though, is that ultimately, when people on the left are talking about immigration, they are often saying it very, very recently. They're saying, well, now the numbers are unsustainable, but they've allowed it to get to 1 million. Ultimately, it's been a Conservative government that's presided over this huge amount of people that have come over, and it's our fault for not allowing people to follow the law. Now, I'm actually quite liberal in immigration. I think immigration overall is really, really good for the economy. It's really good for this country, and I wouldn't be here without it. That being said, people must come here to work and they must come here to contribute. When my grandparents came to the UK in the 60s, they came here to work. They wouldn't have taken benefits. They wouldn't have taken or expected British taxpayers to foot the bill for their lifestyles. They came here and they were honoured to contribute to this country. That is not the case today.
But don't forget, the people who are most in favour of immigration are the big business people who actually want to bring cheap labour in here. They're desperate for it. If you actually look at the real fans, and not some mythical beast on the left of the party or the left of this country, it's actually big businesses who actually want cheap labour. They want to bring it in. Exactly it's the same situation you have in America.
So you're wrong about this very specifically. On the left, there seems to be a cry out for cheaper, low-skilled migration. People like Lord Wolfson,
where's your evidence for that?
Let me finish the sentence.
Come on.
Let me finish my point. People like Lord Wolfson, the CEO of Next. Let me finish my point. People like Lord Wolfson, the CEO of Next, have said, I want more immigration because clearly British people are not going to be filling in those jobs. We're talking about the hospitality sector, we're talking about retail. People are not filling in those jobs. Why is that? It's because we've got a tenth of people on long-term sickness benefits. So our welfare system, I think, is the biggest problem. Again, taxpayers are footing the bill for this. And ultimately what's happening is a lot of young people, many of them are former students, end up claiming long-term sickness benefits because they say they've got mental health problems. Where is the evidence that if you've got depression or anxiety, you should be on benefits?
I think they're better off at work, aren't the people?
Absolutely. Everyone knows that. When you have work, it gives you dignity.
But that's a different issue. You cancel that tomorrow. You're not going to suddenly create a whole load of dentists to replace the Iranian dentist. I'm sorry. It's a different
That's not
issue.
The point is the welfare.
On that note, we're going to knock in there because Stephen's off on one. The ambulance is outside waiting for him. Coming up next, we're going back in the day with Charlie Lambdin.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Bansky's Girl with Balloon is arguably one of the artist's most recognisable images. So when a limited edition print signed by the artist was stolen from Grove Gallery in London, an investigation was launched by the Metropolitan Police's flying squad. The work was thankfully retrieved. The desire to own great works of art has once again become evident this week, albeit a little further afield on the continent. Police in Italy have uncovered a criminal network forging artworks by Bansky, Andy Warhol, Pablo Picasso and others. Investigators said that they've seized more than 2,100 fake pieces of art with a potential market value of about £165 million. With me to discuss that case is the Chief Executive of Grove Gallery, James Ryan.
The art world needs to tighten up. It is known as a bit of a Wild West out there because people will try and chance it with these forgeries. You're quite right, there's only one actual original, but even auction houses have been hoodwinked before.
The burglary that you suffered is sub judice, so we have to be careful what we say about it. But it must have been a bit of a shock to you. I mean, was it a broken window, a smashed door?
At 10, 11 o'clock at night and just hammer straight through, shoulder barging through the door and then in and out, you know, gone in 60 seconds. I must say, I know...
Obviously, that targeted attack. The person would have known what he or she was after. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I must say, I know they cop a lot of flack, the police force, but the flying squad got the artwork back within 3 days. They were fantastic. So yeah, I've never heard or seen, other than the Thomas Crown Affair type film, you know, I just didn't think it'd be happening to little old me, you know, in Fitzrovia, but it did, and thankfully we got it back.
GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time for Back in the Day with housing specialist Charlie Lambdin, and also you're a pilot as well, but we'll get onto that later. Now it's back in the day, Charlie, so back in the day in a place like Ashfield, where I'm from, in the 80s and 90s, you could go to the local council and say, I want a council house. They would give you 3 sets of keys, and they'd say, go away, go and pick the one you want, and you can move in a couple of weeks. Nowadays, you go to the local council, there's 7,000 people on the waiting list. You literally no chance of getting a council house. Why is that, and what can we do about it?
There are 2 reasons for that. Number one was when Thatcher brought in right to buy, on its own, not a problem. The problem was not replacing that housing stock when it was sold off. That was a very big, it was a gradual problem. No one noticed it to begin with, but over the decades, that's led to a massive problem. The second problem is that the government has not been able to build, or hasn't built, sufficient social housing to meet its own housing obligations from whatever source of those housing obligations are met. So The government is now having to spend huge amounts of money in the private sector, paying for temporary accommodation and private rented. And that's bad value for the taxpayer. It's causing councils to go bankrupt. And it's causing people to be unable to get on with their lives. So the social ripple effect of not having enough social housing affects all of us.
So see, Angela Rayner's, she's made this pledge. I think she's going to build 1.5 million council houses, social housing, if you like, over the next 4 to 5 years. Is that feasible? Is that possible?
Not based on what I can see, no, it's not possible at all. I don't think she said she's going to build 1.5 million social homes. It's just 1.5 million homes. Okay. The amount they've pledged towards social homes is actually a fraction of that, and that's the problem. They should be building social homes first so that the taxpayer is not paying temporary accommodation, and people in temporary accommodation can be moved into permanent accommodation and get on with their lives.
So what is it? Why don't we build more houses?
There are a long list of reasons for that. It's not so much the total number for the country. There are places in the country where there are enough houses, it's just not where people want to live. So, and then where you want to build houses, the people who live there don't want houses built. So you've got a NIMBY problem in some places. You've also got changing habits of workforce, so it's becoming harder. For just looking objectively at it, it's becoming harder to work out where. And there are actually blocks of flats in London that have been built and they're still sitting empty because no one can afford them.
So how many houses do you think in the UK are actually empty at the moment?
Well, government's own figures say that there are, I think, from memory, 750,000 long-term empty homes. So that's not including second homes, not including Airbnbs. That's just empty homes. So that's half the government's housing target right there.
That's incredible, isn't it, really? I mean, there's part of the solution. Now, I spoke earlier, Charlie, about my inbox. I get people emailing in, complaining that they can't get a council house, they can't find a house to rent that's cheap enough. But then I get an equal amount of emails from people saying they're building a new development next door to me for 200, 300 houses, and they're complaining as well. So that's a pretty hard, it's hard to go back at both sets of people and with a reasoned argument, because we need more houses. And I always say to people, do you want your children to be able to live in the village or town where they was born? And they all say yes. Well, the answer is to build more houses.
That's exactly right. If you're going to stay in the house that you bought to bring your family up and you're not going to move out, where are your kids going to live?
Yeah.
They need new houses. So I think NIMBYism is a problem. And actually, as a pilot, I fly around the country a lot and see that there are vast swathes of perfectly usable land. The trouble is, it's not where people want it. That's the real problem. So there are empty homes, but they're not where people want them.
Another big problem we have, and we have a little bit of this in Ashfield. We see, I might go and see an old lady who's maybe in her 80s and 90s. She's in a big old 5-bedroomed house, rattling around. She's probably been there 60 years, 70 years. Bought a family up there. Husband's no longer with there. I'm thinking, you know what? A family should be in their house. There should be an incentive to take this old lady out, put her in maybe a bungalow or whatever, so it's easier for her, and free that property up. You get 5 people in there.
Scrap stamp duty and you solve that problem.
Straight away. Why don't we do that?
I don't know why we don't. The single fastest solution to the housing crisis would be to completely scrap stamp duty. And if the government's worried about, well, hang on a second, how do we pay for that? The immediate, Zoopla's estimates are that 2 to 3 times more people would buy and move. So you would inject social mobility back in. You would be creating jobs on the back of that and social mobility that would, I think, more than offset the loss of stamp duty. Yes, council tax needs to be reformed. That's a separate thing. But stamp duty is a tax on social mobility, and it's what's stopping people from downsizing from the big empty homes, because the stamp duty bill they've got to pay on the house they're downsizing to is just too much. It's really off-putting. So stamp duty is a regressive and badly thought-through tax.
So housing specialist, Charlie, also a pilot. How long have you had your licence?
14 years.
14 years. And why did you take to
that? To start with, it was just for fun. It got harder and harder. It's really quite scary. A lot of pilots that get their licence don't renew it after the first couple of years.
Why?
Because you're just left on your own. It teaches you accountability in a way that you've never understood it. Once you've taken off on your own, you are alone. You cannot pull over and stop, and no one can help you. So whatever happens, either you land successfully or you're dead. Right? Wow. So it teaches.
You're not selling it.
Decision. No, well, this is. It's a real. It's such a challenge. It's cathartic. It makes you feel alive. But actually, the skills that you learn in flying and decision making are great in all.
So you must have had some scary moments.
Yeah.
What's the scariest?
Actually, I had my first and hopefully my only emergency at the beginning of this year. I had to do an emergency landing at a military airbase because I got myself into 100% my own fault. I should have landed sooner because the weather was getting worse. I pressed on into bad weather and ended up having to declare an emergency and land at a naval base.
Did you get in trouble for that?
Not from the Navy. They were amazing. They said, we'd much rather you were landed safe than a smoking hole in the hillside somewhere. So they were fantastic. But on social, I have a YouTube channel for my flying, and on social media, I got punished severely there.
And rightly so, I think, wasting all that money and time and effort and worry for people. How does your family feel about this?
They love it. I mean, we get to do things as a family, because I'm a pilot. It's just amazing family trips. And I got to meet amazing people. I mean, the pilot community is full of incredible people, lots of ex-military, ex-airline, and people who just love to fly for just amazing little contraptions with one seat, with no, it's a magical thing to do. Being up there is a very unnatural thing, and you're up there and you're, what am I doing up here? It's
I mean, my mate's got one of these simulators in his bedroom. He's built it. It's absolutely brilliant. I've been and had a go at it, and it's I quite like it, but I don't think I'd be getting into a little single-engine aeroplane and flying around the skies. Like you say, what happens if the engine cuts out?
Oh, that's right. They glide. They all glide.
Really?
Even the big airlines.
No, but how long?
I mean, if you're at 5,000 feet, you've got about 8 or 10 minutes to glide.
As long as that?
Yeah. So you've got plenty of time to pick somewhere. Yeah. And basically, once you get into that situation, you just treat the airplane as an airbag. You don't worry about the plane. You just make sure you get down safely.
What about night flying? Do you do that?
I have done. It's very little, but that's because actually in this country, there are very few small airfields open at night.
Yeah?
Yeah, the CAA doesn't... Everywhere else in Europe and America, you've got pilot-controlled lighting. You can switch on runway lights from the plane. You can't do that.
And what's the best place you've flown to? The furthest?
Norway.
Norway? Over the North Sea?
No, actually, I went all the way around. I went Germany, Belgium, Germany.
So you went over land?
Yes, and then Sweden and Norway. Over a bit of sea as well, and fly seaplanes up there.
You must have seen that film back in the day, the James Stewart old film, the Charles Lindbergh film.
Yes.
Where he flies over the Atlantic. It was about, was it 20-odd hours or 30 hours?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely.
And he paved the way for people like you.
Yeah, he did.
Charlie, fascinating discussion. Brilliant. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Coming up next, we've got right versus left.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Dara is expected to bring heavy outbreaks of rain and some severe gales at times as we head into the weekend. Hail snow too for Scotland, and there are multiple Met Office warnings in force, so do stay up to date on our website for those. This is Storm Dara here out to the west, bringing in heavy outbreaks of rain alongside these frontal systems and a good squeeze in the Isobars, so very strong winds at times across the bulk of the country, particularly around western coasts. These outbreaks of rain are set to continue overnight, still falling as snow across high ground in Scotland, and we're really going to see those winds strengthen in western areas overnight too, particularly in western parts of Wales where we do have a red Met Office wind warning in force too. We could see gusts here reaching around 80 to 90 miles per hour. So for the start of Saturday then, it's going to be a very wet start across a lot of the country. Scotland seeing outbreaks of rain, still some hill snow across higher ground as well. And similar across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland, heavy outbreaks of rain and very strong winds, particularly around coastal areas, but even inland areas seeing some very strong gusts at times. Western parts of Wales likely to see severe gales here at times, making very difficult driving conditions. And on the whole through Saturday, there is likely to be disruption as a result of the storm. The heavy outbreaks of rain continuing. Still a very windy day across a large portion of the country, particularly around western coasts. And looking at the temperatures too later on, we can see highs generally between 9 to 10 Celsius, but in those very, very strong winds as well, that's really going to add on to the wind chill. So it is going to feel a very chilly day, particularly under the rain and in those strong winds. Through into Sunday, we do start to see the weather settle down slightly. We do have some outbreaks of rain still, particularly in eastern areas, a few showers feeding into eastern parts of Scotland. The best of the weather, or the driest and brightest of the weather across Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. But it's still going to be a very blustery day on offer, and we won't really see more settled conditions until we head into next week. Bye for now.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're back, it's right versus left. We've got Reem and we've got Stephen. So what we're going to talk about this week is political donations to the main parties, and the rumour that's circulating around Parliament is that Elon Musk might donate $100 million to the Reform UK party. I'd be delighted with that, actually. But Stephen, is it okay for people from other countries to try and to donate and possibly influence our elections?
I'm not happy with the idea. And I think, to a certain extent, Elon Musk can do what he wants with his money. And he wants to give it through X, or whatever his company's called.
Well, in order for him to do it, he'd have to do it with a British incorporated company.
Yeah, because he's a South African citizen. Yeah, so take your point. But look, there's a real issue here about donations to political parties. And I remember, when we won in '97, the first problem we had was Bernie Ecclestone giving a huge amount of money. There's always, because nobody gives money without a hook in the middle of it. That's the difficulty. And the old thing about who pays the piper calls the tube is a real problem with that. But if you look at what's happening in Romania today with Georgescu, who's a very pro-Putin populist in there, and there's a huge amount of Russian interference in that. And
the difference is,
I'm unhappy about it.
Elon Musk is a private individual, and what he does with his money is entirely of his own volition. And ultimately,
I still don't like it, though.
Well, that's fine. You can not like it, but you probably don't like it because you don't want Reform to be as successful as be more successful than the Labour Party. Unfortunately,
how dare you?
Well, that's ultimately the point.
Yeah. They're behind us in about 200 seats.
Yeah, but Stephen, you just said if you give money to a political party, there's a hook in there somewhere.
Of course there is.
So what about the trade unions giving money to the Labour Party?
Less and less every year.
What about Lord Alley that got a number 10 pass as a result of his donation to the Labour Party?
I'm sorry, Lord Alley is a member of Parliament. I mean, he's got every right to have a pass to come into Downing.
No, he doesn't. Why does every single other Labour Lord?
Well, I did.
Does every other Labour Lord have a number 10 pass? Stephen, that's outrageous. No, that's outrageous.
Sorry, he had a 10-day pass.
The reason why he got a number 10 pass close to Keir Starmer is because he was a donor. So don't give me that. Don't tell me that it was absolutely fine as a member of Parliament. I don't see any other Labour Lords with number 10 passes.
Stephen, will you be quiet and let Reem get a word in?
I beg your pardon.
It's all right. I'll give you a slap.
Come on. Did you see that? Security, please come. No, go on, Steve.
No,
the trade unions, they've got a hook into the Labour Party with big donations.
Look, hang on a second, Lee. The trade unions formed the Labour Party.
But that's not an argument, Steve.
Hang on a second. So you and I have both been trade unionists in our working life. And what we want in the trade unions is actually the same principle that the Labour Party was. That's that solidarity and community. And so I don't see any problem with it.
Where is the solidarity and community when train drivers on upwards of £67,000 a year are still striking? And the reason for that is because they see a Labour government.
What train drivers are striking?
Train drivers. They cancelled their strike at the beginning of November.
So you're wrong.
Because they got another pay deal, a second pay deal from a Labour government. So the point still remains. Unions fund the Labour Party and they're able to have a foothold under the Labour government. They attempted to do the same thing with the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party were incredibly weak in government. And it meant that what happened is that they entirely gave in. The Labour Party are much more likely to give in. The point is, any private individual or private organisation has the complete right to do whatever they want with their own money. And if Elon Musk wishes to donate to Reform, he has every right to do so.
A number of individuals, I'm thinking of Bamfords, the JCB people, who give a huge amount of money to the Conservative Party. They give much more collectively than they do the trade union. Don't forget, not every trade union funds the Labour Party. I wish they did.
So why do you have a problem
with Elon Musk?
The biggest unions,
like the teachers, they don't actually fund the Labour Party.
So why do you have a problem with Elon Musk?
Because the trade unions...
It's because you don't like him. It's okay when they do it, but not okay when they do it.
Trade unions are part of the warp and weft of this nation. They're ordinary working men and women. Elon Musk...
Why do you get to decide? Why do you get to decide who is okay and who isn't?
I don't decide that Elon Musk is a South African entrepreneur who's a profoundly weird individual. He is. That's the fact. Trade unions...
It's not a fact, it's your opinion. I think he's brilliant. He's done more for the world than any government when it comes to environmental policy. Net zero, all of this stuff is absolute. He's
a complete climate denier.
He's expanded EVs, electric vehicles, more than anybody has ever done. And it is proof, by the way, that you don't need government net zero policies to solve climate change. What you need is private individuals, entrepreneurs that result in technological advancements like Elon
Electric
Musk.
vehicles will only succeed if you have tax advantages and tax disadvantages. Nobody will want to buy an electric vehicle unless there's
why there's 60 million electric vehicles on roads there.
And less are being sold percentage-wise every day.
Electric vehicles are much cheaper now than they ever have been, and the reason for that is because they are cheaper now than they ever have been, and the reason for that is because entrepreneurs are able to do so. Elon Musk has done that.
There's a reason, Stephen, we don't drive around on the roads on horse and carts.
Yes.
You might remember those days, I certainly don't, but there is a reason for that, because of entrepreneurs.
It's because of capitalism, it's because of the free market, it's because entrepreneurs like Elon Musk have contributed to this world, and I think he has every right to support parties that uphold those ideologies, that uphold the system, that allow people to be successful.
I mean, the reason why we drive around in cars, not in horses and carts, is because the state supported Gottlieb Daimler and various other people in Germany.
That's not true.
I'm sorry. If you actually have a look at the origin of the motor car came because of state support for universities in Germany.
So actually, yes, you are right. Historically, that's true. But it's unequivocally untrue to say that the reason why we have such economic success today is because of the state. It's not true. It's because businesses have been able to provide things that other people want.
And where did they get their education?
Where do they get their education? Depends on the country, depends on the state. Ultimately, I think that you can't sit here and say that the British state education system is one of success. I went through the state education system in the UK. It was not great. Well, most people.
You did all right.
Thank you, I did okay. Well, that's a result of working hard.
Time for the yes or no quiz. Reem, you must have watched this programme.
I have, I love this programme.
Okay, best programme on GB?
Best programme in the world.
In the world, okay. It's time for the yes-no quiz, and it's got to be yes or a no. You know this, Reem. You know this, Stephen. You've actually won a few of these, haven't you?
Yes.
Let's see. He's not going to fall for it. Right. Question number one. Remember, yes or no. No verbal ticking allowed. No grunting. No moaning. That's difficult.
No nuance.
Yeah. Should we cap immigration?
No.
Stephen?
Yes.
Ooh. Stephen, can Parliament be trusted with immigration?
Yes.
No.
Conflict. Reem, over in the US, will Donald Trump stop illegal migration?
Yes.
Stephen?
No.
Stephen, will Starmer smash the gangs?
Yes.
No.
Stephen, should Elon Musk be allowed to donate to Reform UK?
Yes.
Yes.
5-5. Wonders he never sees. Stephen, you did quite well in that. Would you like a tiebreaker?
Got no choice, mate.
Wrong answer.
Oh. You're crafty.
Reem, would you like a tiebreaker?
Yes.
We don't need one now, do we?
I won, you lose.
You crafty person.
Do you want to come back on one, Reem? Can Parliament be trusted with immigration?
So it's interesting that your initial question before was, do we need a cap on immigration? I don't think that's true. I think we need businesses to provide the jobs, and it's provided that there are those jobs, those migrants should be able to come and fill them, should they wish to. When it comes to Parliament being trusted on immigration, I don't think it should be the government's decision about whether or not those migration figures are correct, which is why I don't believe in net zero migration tomorrow. I don't think that's the government's right to implement it. I think if there are other jobs here, people should be allowed to come. They shouldn't be allowed to take taxpayer money and effectively take out from the benefit system. So I don't believe in that.
But Reem, if the government isn't going to set this, who is?
Who is? As I just said, businesses. If you
so individual businesses have individual laws for individual numbers of people.
No, it's not the laws, Stephen. Don't be silly. It's if there are.
Don't be silly. Now you've started that.
If there are the jobs there, people should be allowed to come and fill them. So I don't know what the number is, but what will happen is that if there are the jobs there, and businesses like Lord Wolfson's Next, they have the jobs there, and people want to come and fill those jobs, they should have the right to do so. So it's not the government.
I can understand Lord Wolfson. You're on about Lord Wolfson, who's done some great work, by the way.
Yes.
And you can understand his frustrations with the system, that he's actually saying this. I would imagine that he would love to have British workers working in his
the way the system works at the moment.
But too many people are on benefits. not work it?
You can issue a work permit, but first of all, you have to actually advertise the job locally to see if nobody
Under current law, but I'd scrap that law.
So what you'd say is, if somebody says, I want 5 dentists, I can actually just import 5 dentists.
Absolutely. It shouldn't be up to the government to decide. It should be up to private businesses to decide.
So
that's my point. I don't believe the government...
That would be bad for the nation, wouldn't it? Because it would drive down the... Yeah, I'm sorry, it would.
No, it wouldn't. The reason why
Stephen,
the reason why people in this country, this is the lump of labour fallacy. The idea that if we are to import migration, this is an economic concept. The idea that if we are to import loads of people, that suddenly means that wages are suppressed. That's not true. The problem at the moment is that we have huge amounts of people on benefits. A tenth of the adult working population are on long-term sickness benefits. That is a scandal. That is a disgrace. When huge amounts of people are on benefits in this country, and then at the same time we're importing 1 million people, net migration a year, clearly there's a disconnect here. I don't think it's up to the government to decide. They should remove those benefits so British people can actually work and fill those jobs.
Right, guys, that's it.
So you're saying the government should be
Guys, Stephen, please reduce your aggressive attitude. I won't have second thoughts about it.
She's beating me up here.
You do it again. Reem apologised for his behaviour.
Okay,
Coming up next, we've got Last Orders with Ryan Mark Parsons.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Jaguar has ditched its growling big cat logo as part of what can only be described as a woke rebrand. The badge that has been used for decades, look at it, beautiful, on the bonnets of luxury cars has been swapped for a curved geometric J badge. They've also released a brand new advert, look at it, for their rebrand, which prompted Elon Musk to ask if the company actually sold cars. I thought this was a wind-up. It's not. It's true. And joining me now to discuss this is the motoring journalist, Amanda Stratton. Amanda, what on earth is going on at Jaguar? The car of James Bond, Batman, Arthur Daley has gone off the scale woke. Please make me make sense of it.
The E-Type is an absolutely iconic car, and it's important that people remember that, in fact, in its heyday, Jaguar was an incredibly prestigious brand, more so really than other British brands like Aston Martin, for example. But, you know, people in the industry are left sort of scratching their heads because you need to do something bold, you need to do something that catches people's attention, but you also need to stay true to who you are and what you are, and I'm not sure that this is it.
Amanda, that could be an advert for anything. It could be cat food. It could be Karl Lagerfeld. It could be literally anything apart from a Jag. Well, I mean, honestly, OK, we're talking about it. So we are talking about it, but we're not talking about it for the right reasons, are we?
And I think if I was going to be speculative here, I would like to think that this is actually all part of a cunning plan to get everybody talking about it. Yeah. So when they do launch the first new car that we're going to see, which, you know, people have been waiting, as I say, since 2001.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, that's Last Orders at the Bar, and I'm joined with Ryan Mark Parsons, who's a TV personality, a columnist, and he was on The Apprentice a few years back, weren't you? That's where most people would recognise your face from. One of the youngest contenders ever on The Apprentice. How did that work out?
Well, you know what? I never in a million years thought I'd get on the show. I was 18 when I applied. There were about 6 months of auditions. It was intense. You met Lord Sugar's advisors, his lawyers, his business advisors. It was the most intense thing I've ever done. And I just thought, never in a million years am I going to get on the show as a teenager. And I got the call from the exec. And he was like, you're one of the 16 candidates. And it was just like, really? Total shock.
But why? Why, Ryan? Why?
Well, I applied when I was drunk. It was.
Yeah, we're not encouraging irresponsible drinking on this show, but you applied when you was drunk.
Might end up on The Apprentice. And then I just went through the whole process. I took a gap year. I've just finished my A-levels. I was working in Harrods before. And I just came up with this business idea, took it onto the show. And I got fired in the end. I lasted 8 weeks, which wasn't too bad. But
what was the business idea? Educate me.
A concierge, similar to companies like Velocity Black, quintessentially, that work with some of the private banks. It was similar to that. I was inspired by my time in Harrods, working with some of these ultra high net worth clients. So I just wrote a 40-page business plan like we all have to do. But I didn't make it to the interview, so I didn't get to talk about it. But no, it was a great experience, a very tough experience, but unforgettable.
So at a young age, how did that change your life at that age? Because you must have got recognised, starting to be recognised when you're going out and about town.
Yeah, I mean, it happened quite quickly because the adverts start rolling out on BBC One and then the shows go on air. It's once a week on a Wednesday. You're getting about 7 million people tuning in every week.
Yep.
And yeah, it was surreal. It was surreal. And then suddenly you get invitations to things. You're going to premieres and it was a lot. It was a lot at a young age. And I obviously had no training for any of that. But I just embraced it and I've had fun with it.
But at the end of that, at the end of the 8 weeks or whatever it is, you're like off the edge of a cliff edge and it all stops. What do you do then?
I mean, as soon as I got fired, I got my phone back. We didn't have a phone for the whole the whole time filming. No news, no music. So that was a kind of relief to get that humanity back into my life. But you just start getting offers as well. Obviously, sometimes when you do reality shows, if you're a big personality, you stand out, you get other TV offers. And I've done other shows since. And it kind of opened my eyes up to the world of the media. So that's been good.
So you write columns for newspapers as well?
Yeah, so I've worked with the Daily Express, I've worked at Reach, I've done Good Morning Britain about 30 times now, Sky News, Newsnight. Celebs Go Dating on Channel 4, I've done that twice.
Yeah.
I've done shows in Wales, I've done shows with YouTubers like Young Philly on BBC Three. And that's all really because of the show, so it has been a blessing. It's given me a lot of money since the show. I've met incredible people, so I'd never in a million years take it back.
So you've packed quite a bit in, right, into your young life so far, but you're still, you're working in politics at the moment. You're working in Westminster.
Yeah.
You're working in my neck of the woods in the same building. You work for a...
Seen you at Strangers.
Yeah, we'll keep that bit quiet. But you work for a Member of Parliament. We're not saying which one because I don't think that's fair. But I mean, how do you find that, working for a Member of Parliament?
I mean, that place...
That's difficult, isn't it, to do?
Yeah, it's quite intense. I mean, I've always wanted to be... I've always liked the idea of becoming a Member of Parliament. Yeah. I've joined the Conservative Party when I was 16. I've always been involved locally in politics, local activism. Being in that place, I just think through osmosis, you learn so much just being there. And then obviously I'm there 5 days a week with my boss and just seeing what he gets up to. It really, really does open your eyes to the job of an MP and how hard it is. I mean, to just get some free time. I mean, my particular boss, I can't say the same with every MP, but he works relentlessly every single day, if it's in Westminster or the constituency. And it's great to learn. It's a really great place to learn, and I'm loving it.
Well, I do know your boss, by the way. I've spent many a happy hour with your boss, a good man. I actually went away with him a few years back. We went to Israel on the Conservative Friends of Israel trip, where we did the old. We had a few days in Tel Aviv, then went to Jerusalem, we went on to the West Bank.
Oh, wow.
So it was like an educational tour as well. He's a great man. But you say you want to be a Member of Parliament at some stage.
Yeah.
Why? Why would you do that?
Like I was saying, I've always cared a lot about the community I grew up in, which is in South East London. I mean, that would be a blessing to one day represent them if that ever would to become a possibility. I think there's something where I really do care and would love to advocate for people in the community. And I think being an MP, you get that unique privilege to really work with members of the community and do what you can for them.
Right, Ryan, you've been an apprentice. Get a pint pot, mate, one of them, any of them there.
Well, I've never done this before.
Well, so stop using that pathetic excuse. Neck oil. You've got to pull a pint in 30 seconds and plonk it on the bar. Go for it.
Right.
You talk about Bob Stewart. Bob used to... Well, keep going, mate.
Right.
Bob had the next door but one office to me. Plonk it on the bar,
I think
please.
this is a disaster.
It is, yeah. Come on, put it on. It's pathetic.
Right, there you
Rubbish.
go. Well, I've never done that before, so...
Well, it doesn't show. It doesn't show. But no, Bob Stewart, a great man.
Yeah, very good.
War hero.
Yeah.
Back in the day. He was Colonel Bob.
Yeah.
That's what we call him, Colonel Bob. He got his bugle in his office. He used to play his bugle sometimes, and see all the old memorabilia, the photos on his wall. A great man. Got into a spot of bother last year. Got a conviction. Then we had a whip round at work. We set up a GoFundMe page and got like, I don't know, about 15, 20 grand. Wow. He appealed the decision and won.
Oh, wow, right. Okay.
But then he just, 70 odd is Bob. He decided not to stand again for Parliament. But a great man, a really good man. I always felt I was in good company with Bob. So, let's fast forward 10 years, Ryan. Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Well, in 10 years, I'll be 34, which seems old to me. But
Really?
well, yeah, a little bit.
That? Old, 34.
A little bit. But I would like to see how it's going now, learn more in the job, being in the House of Commons. I still really would like to be an MP, and I'd love to be an MP in my 30s, or at least a candidate or have had some kind of election experience. I think that's where I see myself.
But not a businessman?
I've tried the business, and I think a lot of... being an MP, I think, in a way, you are a brand. You're selling yourself to voters. You've got to then maintain incumbency with constituents. And I think a part of that is you're running social media. You're selling yourself as a product as an MP. So I think, in a way, there is a lot of business.
That's a small part of it, to be honest, Ryan. I mean, the brand is the political party that you're in. If that brand's no good, then you ain't going to get elected. I mean, I'm living proof of that. I got elected in 2019 as a Conservative Member of Parliament.
Yeah.
I then got re-elected in my same seat this year as a Reform UK Member of Parliament, and all my friends in the Tory party lost their seats.
Yeah.
So the branding is quite important.
Yeah, no, it is. And so, yeah, you're right. It's not obviously the biggest part of it, but I think there's an aspect of it. So I won't ever lose that business side. Yeah. I just think it would be reimagined in different ways. But I definitely see politics being my future.
And if you became a minister, what would be your portfolio?
Oh, I think Department for Culture, Media and Sport. I think with my reality TV background, DCMS makes sense. Yeah.
And would you scrap the BBC licence?
Oh, well, I'm from the BBC. I mean, they gave me my first break. I'd feel bad saying that. But I think, look, I think when you look at their shows, I did Newsnight last week as well. But obviously, I'm a big fan of GB News, and I hope it flourishes even more.
Right.
There we go.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Lee.
That's
Cheers.
Last Orders. What a great guy. Oh, by the way,
that was 10.
2 out of 10. Thanks for joining me on Lee Anderson's Real World. Been another great show with some great guests. But coming up next, we've got Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan.
Thank you, Lee, for another cracking show. This is Mark Dolan and Friday Night Live. The weekend starts here, folks. Is rail nationalisation an expensive political vanity project? Should we give up our pets to save the planet? Can you imagine living without your cat or your dog in order to pursue the goal of net zero? Also, does the political and economic chaos in France and Germany prove that we are lucky to be out of the EU? Also tonight, were the conspiracy theorists right all along about COVID? And would we have been better off doing nothing? The vaccine tyranny, the masking, the lockdowns, was it all a colossal mistake? Also tonight, as Reform UK sensationally overtake Labour in the polls, is Nigel Farage now unstoppable? Is talk about this guy being Britain's next Prime Minister genuinely possible? Is it credible or is it hype? Also tonight, we're going to talk about Keir Starmer's disastrous speech yesterday at the Pinewood Studios. If he stays this unpopular, should Labour get rid of him? We'll debate that, plus much more. All my pundits in the studio. I'll see you after this.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Dara is expected to bring heavy outbreaks of rain and some severe gales at times as we head into the weekend. Hail snow too for Scotland, and there are multiple Met Office warnings in force, so do stay up to date on our website for those. This is Storm Dara here out to the west, bringing in heavy outbreaks of rain alongside these frontal systems and a good squeeze in the isobars, so very strong winds at times across the bulk of the country, particularly around western coasts. These outbreaks of rain are set to continue overnight, still falling as snow across high ground in Scotland, and we're really going to see those winds strengthen in western areas overnight too, particularly in western parts of Wales where we do have a red Met Office wind warning in force too. We could see gusts here reaching around 80 to 90 miles per hour. So for the start of Saturday then, it's going to be a very wet start across a lot of the country. Scotland seeing outbreaks of rain, still some hill snow across higher ground as well. And similar across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland, heavy outbreaks of rain and very strong winds, particularly around coastal areas, but even inland areas seeing some very strong gusts at times. Western parts of Wales likely to see severe gales here at times, making very difficult driving conditions. And on the whole through Saturday, there is likely to be disruption as a result of the storm. The heavy outbreaks of rain continuing. Still a very windy day across a large portion of the country, particularly around western coasts. And looking at the temperatures too later on, we can see highs generally between 9 to 10 Celsius, but in those very, very strong winds as well. That's really going to add on to the wind chill, so it is going to feel a very chilly day, particularly under the rain and in those strong winds. Through into Sunday, we do start to see the weather settle down slightly. We do have some outbreaks of rain still, particularly in eastern areas, a few showers feeding into eastern parts of Scotland. The best of the weather, or the driest and brightest of the weather across Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. But it's still going to be a very blustery day on offer, and we won't really see more settled conditions until we head into next week. Bye for now.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For your chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation,
daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Happy Friday, one and all. God knows we need a weekend. From the world headquarters of GB News, this is Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. The weekend starts here, so bring your own drinks. The admission is free. On tonight's show, is rail nationalisation an expensive political vanity project? Should we give up our pets to save the planet? Does the political and economic chaos in France and Germany prove that we're lucky to be out of the EU? And were the conspiracy theorists right all along about COVID? And would we have been better off doing nothing? Also tonight, as Reform UK sensationally overtake Labour in the polls, is Nigel Farage now unstoppable? To fall out over those topics and many more tonight, my Friday A-team. We have broadcaster and truth bomb dropper Chloe Dobbs, BBC radio legend Liz Kershaw, and fearless political commentator Zoe Grunewald. Plus, at the end of the show, tonight's top 10 list. Labour government-themed Bond movies. You won't want to miss it. That's tonight's top 10. But first, after a disastrous speech yesterday, if Sir Keir Starmer remains this unpopular, should his party get rid of him? That's after the news headlines and someone that's here to stay, Sophia Hill.
Mark, thank you. A very good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill with your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. Top story this evening, 3 million people have received an emergency alert from the government after forecasters issued a rare red warning for wind as Storm Dara hits the UK. This is the largest use of the system outside a test scenario in April last year. Gusts of up to 90 miles an hour are expected to batter parts of Wales and the southwest of England, including Cardiff, Bristol and Devon. This warning, in place from 3 a.m. tomorrow, calls for people to take care as flying debris and falling trees could pose a danger to life. An amber warning is also in place for the west coast of the UK, from Scotland to Cornwall and Northern Ireland, with large waves and potential damage to homes and buildings. Heavy rain and over 100 flood warnings are also in effect, adding to the weekend's challenges. Now, in Scotland, a farm has been placed under lockdown after a cow tested positive for atypical mad cow disease. The Scottish Government has imposed strict movement restrictions on affected animals, although it says there is no risk to public health and the cow did not enter the food chain. The case in Dumfries and Galloway was detected through routine surveillance, and investigations are now underway to determine its origin. Authorities have assured the public that stringent control measures are in place to prevent any wider impact. And the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has signed a controversial trade deal with South American countries, which could have a significant impact on farmers in the UK. The deal has been met with firm opposition from several EU member states and is expected to face a backlash from the farming sector across Europe, with significant impact in Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. European farmers have consistently protested against the EU-Mercosur deal, arguing it could lead to cheap imports of South American food, especially beef, which they claim does not meet the EU's environmental and food safety standards. And to end, the Princess of Wales has made a rare public appearance with her family at Westminster Abbey for her annual Christmas Carol service this evening. The royal couple walked into the historic Abbey, where they married in 2011, with their children, who stopped at the kindness tree to hang messages in dedication to someone who has supported them during their lives. This year's Together at Christmas event celebrates love and empathy, with 1,600 guests invited. In a message sent ahead of the service, Kate said that Christmas is a moment of celebration and joy, as well as an opportunity to slow down and reflect on the deeper things that connect us all. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. I'll be back in an hour, but now it's back to Mark.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, it was the hottest ticket in town. No, not Taylor Swift at Wembley. Not Peter Kay at the O2 Apollo in Manchester. It was our expensively dressed Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, addressing an expectant nation from Pinewood Film Studios. How appropriate, Pinewood, given how wooden this performance was. Still wearing the proceeds of a high-end shopping spree with Lord Ali, a besooted Prime Minister compared himself to a film franchise which put Pinewood on the map, James Bond. Unfortunately, the only licence Starmer had was to bore us to tears with yet another flowery address, which was big on poetry and thin on policy. This felt like an AI-generated speech from Britain's first AI-generated Prime Minister. Sir Keir Starmer being the human manifestation of ChatGPT software gone wrong. Our laser-printed premier, crafted from the finest cardboard, bamboozled his audience with platitudes and slogans. Even the gags failed to land, with his joke about being 007 going down as well as Greg Wallace at a Women's Institute Christmas lunch. Somebody could put together, quite frankly, a clip reel of Starmer's attempts at humour over the years and play them back to Hamas operatives as a form of torture. The Gaza war would end in an instant. The hostages returned by close of play. Free the sausages. Oh, folks, we have got 4 years of this, and our only hope is that the PM might deliver for the country by accident or something, based on the idea that a broken clock is at least right twice a day. Certainly his keenness to ignore regulations and NIMBYism to get Britain building again is a good place to start. Keir the builder. Can he build it? Keir the builder? Maybe. I've seen his helmet. Now, similarly, a goal to improve living standards so that we can enjoy maybe 0.1% of the luxury lifestyle of his millionaire mate, Lord Ali, is to be encouraged. And who doesn't want equal opportunities for all? Bring it on. But the problem is, not only was the speech uninspiring and characteristically vague, it was a missed political opportunity. Because Starmer could have used this moment to ditch his clearly failing policies and properly start again. How ironic that the king of the U-turn in opposition now refuses to U-turn in power and, as a result, is driving the country into a very deep ditch. This was a speech by committee, for a government by committee, promising not even the status quo, but further decline. This speech wasn't change, it was more of the same. More taxing, more borrowing, more bloated, failing public services, more living beyond our means, and more clobbering wealth creators who pay for everything. Like, for example, a now furious Tom Kerridge, the TV chef, who regrets co-signing a letter of 120 leading entrepreneurs endorsing Labour before the election in what looks like the ultimate example of turkeys voting for Christmas. Kerridge and the other misguided business owners taken in by Starmer and Reeves' charm offensive are well and truly stuffed. Gobble, gobble. So, on the strength of this speech and this non-reboot, there is no way that Labour will win the next election. But so far, under Kemi Badenoch, there has been no compelling offer either from her and her party to a country which is desperate for radical change. If she's not willing to commit to a seismic Trump-style revolution in the UK, we know a man who is. Reacting to the big stories of the day, broadcaster and dropper of truth bombs Chloe Dobbs, BBC radio legend Liz Kershaw, and fearless political commentator Zoe Groenewald. Great to see all three of you. Happy Friday. Zoe, let me start with you. If Keir Starmer remains this unpopular, should Labour get rid of him?
Well, I would say no, because I think what has happened is we've had a situation for the last, five years of government where we've had lots and lots of churn, and it's not just prime ministers, but it's also ministers and secretaries of state, and that has meant that any genuine, legitimate political agenda for the radical change that you set out in your speech has just been pushed to the back of the queue. So what you have are new ministers coming in wanting to make their mark. You have lots of time wasted with political gossip. You have lots of time wasted about churn, when really what we need and what this country needs is someone who is ready to go all in on policy. Now, you can ask a question about whether Starmer's doing enough. I think that's a totally legitimate question. I think he hasn't done enough so far to give the country the optimism it needs about the future and to set out an agenda that genuinely will deal with the issues in this country. But I don't think we should talk about replacing leaders purely based on their popularity. We need to talk about them based on their competence. And I have to say, 5 months in, that's not an awful lot of time. I think we need to give it longer. And I think, at the next election, we will see if he can achieve those milestones and judge him on that, as he's asked us.
It might be a dilemma for the Labour movement in the months ahead if Starmer's ratings remain this low. And Zoe's right, he's got a mandate. It's only 5 months in. But is Keir Starmer Labour's Liz Truss?
I mean, he's pretty unpopular, and what you tend to see with Prime Minister's popularity ratings, you can see this with a graph of all the other previous Prime Ministers from Tony Blair on the Spectator Data Hub, that once your approval ratings plummet down, they very, very rarely ever come back up. And that means that it's going to be difficult for Keir Starmer, even though he's got a lot of seats in the House of Commons, in terms of dealing with the press, to do what he wants to do. Now, I don't want the Labour Party to become like the Tory Party, where they are constantly chopping and changing leader, focusing on leadership contests all the time. And let's be honest, as you say, Mark, the public are crying out for change, but they are going to have to wait a little while for a general election. They're crying out for a change of party, not for... No, I don't see everyone on Twitter going, oh, get Angela Rayner in instead of Keir Starmer, she'll be so much better. Get Rachel Reeves in as Prime Minister instead of Keir Starmer. Get David Lammy. Can you imagine? All our taxpayer money would then go to the Caribbean. So there's no other good talent, if you ask me, on offer in the Cabinet to replace him with. So he's going to have to be our Prime Minister for a little while longer.
Yeah. If David Lammy was Prime Minister, there'd be a special box in your self-assessment form for reparations, wouldn't there? It would definitely be pricey. I'm going to say, Liz, I disagree with Zoe and Chloe. I'm convinced that Sir Keir Starmer is a dud, and if I was a Labour supporter, I would want to get rid.
He should go. He should, because he's incompetent, and his main incompetency is, as you alluded to in your speech, is just depressing. He just knocks all the spirit and optimism out of the country. People are miserable, and we need a cheerleader. When I say should go, he could go, but let me say it's different from the French situation at the moment. I've been in France this week.
Lucky you.
It was a lot.
Did you bring me a bottle back?
Yeah, but I emptied it.
Of course you did. You're only human. I can smell the garlic from here, by the way. I'm glad you had a good time.
And because they got Michel Barnier, but he wasn't elected by his peers, by his party members. He was implanted by the president, Macron, and that was after a gerrymandered election. Do you remember it? It was hastily called, and then Macron didn't like...
A huge gamble which backfired.
Well, he didn't like the outcome of the first round, so he changed it because it looked like the RN and Marie Le Pen's party was going to take power and she could potentially become president. So he persuaded all the, lefties to get together and gang up. So he gerrymandered the election, and then it took him 2 months to choose Barnier. He's in a hell of a problem now because there's no likely candidate. The difference is, and why I'm stressing this, is he was implanted by a president. It's like King Charles having chosen our Prime Minister. The party voted, and as Chloe said, the party voted for him. The people who put him there are all duffs. The caliber's really rather poor. You've got Keir Charmer, shall we now call him? I've got Angela No Brainer.
Well, that's right. Now, Liz, let's fix your microphone because we've got a couple of crackles on the line.
Okay.
But Zoe, is there insufficient strength in depth for anyone to replace Starmer anyway?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of talent in the cabinet, actually. I think.
Care to name names?
Yeah, I think Angela Rayner's really rather good. I mean, I liked Lou Haig as well. I thought she was one of the ministers who's actually getting on with things. I think we've seen quite a lot of progress behind the scenes with Ed Miliband. I think, I'm sure that's not going to go down necessarily well with all your viewers, but I actually do think there is.
Do you think it was a bit harsh that Louise Haig actually stepped down from her post? It was an historic conviction. It was the most minor law-breaking you can imagine.
Yeah, I thought...
And she told the boss.
I thought something else was going to come out because I couldn't understand why they acted so swiftly, but I think actually it was possibly an overcorrection on the back of the freebies scandal that had been plaguing Labour, and I think they were worried about optics. But I don't think it was fair that Lou Haig stepped down. Actually, I think we say it was historic, and apparently it was disclosed to the Prime Minister. So, look, I think. I really have to stress this. 5 months, we've had a budget, we've had a really dire set of circumstances that Labour have inherited. Any leader was going to be unpopular when they preside over those kind of economic circumstances and the degradation of public services. Labour say they have a plan. Let's give them a chance to implement it. Let's judge them by their words. That's what they're asking.
Why has growth gone from 0.5% to 0.1% since July?
Well, I mean, that's a knock. Well, because of some of the stuff that was being presumably implemented by Rishi, there's always a lag.
No, it was because they were forecasting or giving us hints about what they were going to do when they got into power, and it depressed the markets before they even won the election.
So I agree with you. I don't think Labour's message has been particularly strong. I actually think it's been...
What about policy platform? Because I want Keir Starmer to succeed, but I thought a missed opportunity yesterday to actually properly reboot and go, do you know what? We've made mistakes and we're going to take a different tack. We're actually going to get rid of red tape for businesses. We're going to stop taxing wealth creators and we're going to have growth. But there was no tangible change in strategy.
I think what Keir Starmer needs to do and needed to do from the beginning was say, look, we've had a difficult few years. It's been tough for all these reasons. But this is what the country is going to become under my leadership. Paint a really clear image. What is that? Is it making the country more equal? Is it spades in the ground? I think for a while it was supposed to be Get Britain Building, as you said. But where's that gone? We haven't really heard much about that.
Well, we're going to get 1.5 million new homes.
What you need is a clear vision. Well, I mean...
When there's 1.5 million new people arrived in the last 2 years.
Although that is a Tory legacy, we should say. Chloe, what do you think? I mean, will the British... Go on.
I mean, you said Keir Starmer, he needs to paint a clearer vision about the future, and, of course, the guy definitely needs help with talking with charisma and writing speeches. But the elephant in the room that he completely missed out in that speech is talking about immigration, the thing that matters most to voters, that people are absolutely crying out for action for. He says, we need to have all these metrics to measure our progress on things. And then when it gets to, his priorities that he brought up, he did not put immigration in there and set a number and say this is what we're aiming for. And then, of course, he just absolutely died when the press started asking him all of the questions, because they're all asking, well, what about the immigration numbers? Why won't you set a cap at 100,000 or something? And he's like, immigration doesn't need a number attached to it. We don't need a metric for that. And we're like, what on earth? He really just doesn't care about the issue.
Briefly, Liz?
You cannot plan economically or in any other way. You can't plan security, you can't plan education unless you know numbers, unless you know how many people you're dealing with, how many people you're catering for. And we don't actually know how many people are in this country.
Well, I think it's
they won't admit it.
I mean, I think it's an easy win for Starmer to get the numbers down in the next 4 years. Let's hope he stays to his word and does that. Briefly, Chloe, will the British public ever like Sir Keir Starmer, and does it matter?
I don't think that they will ever like him. As I said, once your approval rating goes down, then that's it. And I mean, listening to him, it's like watching paint dry. Nigel Farage clearly is doing brilliantly. We've now seen the Reform taking over Labour in the polls. One of the huge reasons why is because the guy actually has some charisma, unlike the rest of them.
Zoe, does Keir Starmer's personality matter? Are we being too personal here?
I think it matters when you have a country that is thoroughly depressed. I think, I agree with Liz when she says there needs to be more of a vision, and maybe there should have been some optimism. I think it was a mistake to go in and say things are terrible. Leave that to your Chancellor. Let your Chancellor paint the fiscal prudent picture. The Prime Minister needs to have a vision for what...
One last word. It's going to be even more unpopular in January when we have the trial of the Southport alleged stabber, because a lot's going to come out about who knew what and when, and people are going to have even less faith in him and like him even less.
Fascinating stuff. That one's going to run and run. But it's time now for our biggest and greatest Great British giveaway this year, and your chance to win £50,000 in tax-free cash. It's the biggest cash prize we've ever given away, and here's how you get your hands on it. Here are the details for how to win 50k.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For your chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck indeed. Is rail nationalisation an expensive political vanity project? And should we give up our pets to save the planet? I'll be showing you my pussy after this.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
This is Miss Universe fans hailing the end of wokeness and crediting the Trump effect after a biological woman, there's still some of them around apparently, has won the 2024 crown. She's Miss Denmark, because obviously the last decade, you know, it's just been a beast transgender smurfs from Papua New Guinea. They're the only people allowed to win any beauty contest, you know what I mean? You're not allowed to have any.
There's some of the trans women have won these. You definitely wouldn't say no.
No,
They look amazing.
I've seen but I've seen some of them that didn't, and some that, you know, were clearly just there out of, you know. Well,
have there been more than one trans woman? I didn't realise this. Okay,
I've got a chart at home. This one isn't trans. Victoria Kjær Thielvig, 21 of Denmark. Everything about that description says attractive.
Nazis. Okay, yes. I have seen pictures of her. She is very attractive.
Yes.
She is.
Yes.
I don't know exactly how to put it, but she is kind of not retro or vintage or so. She's quite an old-fashioned notion of beauty, like just absolutely ice blue eyes. You know,
no penis.
Absolutely extraordinary, clear skin and gorgeous blonde hair. I mean, it's absolutely kind of mid-70s. You know, beauty.
Well, apparently the sanity's returned to the beauty pageant industry, so they can get back to, you know, sexualising 4-year-olds and promoting anorexia like they used to. So
there is that.
She will earn an estimated $250,000 annual salary working full-time as Miss Universe, and will live in a luxurious New York City apartment as she carries out her duties, which involve glass coffee tables and rich Saudi businessmen.
Glass coffee tables. And visiting other planets and solar systems and constellations, I would imagine, of Miss Universe.
Being concerned about animals.
Yes, absolutely, and wanting to bring about world peace. I miss those days.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Is rail nationalisation an expensive political vanity project? Chloe Dobbs.
I think it probably is. I'm not sure that it just seems like ideology rather than actually practicality. Now, yes, the railways, the tickets are just way too expensive. They're often not running on time. I mean, Liz has just been telling us in the break that it took her 4 hours to drive here. And if the railways actually worked properly, then more people would take the train and the roads wouldn't be so busy for Liz, which is, of course, important.
And more space for Liz in her Jaguar.
Yeah, but the thing
You've got an old school Jag, haven't you? Not a woke one, right?
A growler.
Yeah, so I've heard.
But I don't think that this is going to make the trains more efficient. The problem with the trains is that you have local monopolies, even if you bring in private firms. So, I mean, where I grew up in Cornwall, it's all great GWR, Great Western Railway. It's not like I can say, oh, I'll go on this other provider today because it's cheaper. So they have to give out these contracts. But they would be able to keep it somewhat competitive and keep up standards if they actually enforce the terms of the contracts. They never hit their targets, but they face no repercussions for it. If they said, right, if you don't get this percentage of trains on time, that's it, you're out, we're handing the contract to someone else next year, then things would actually work more efficiently. Putting it in public hands, I mean, how's that going to make it more efficient?
You are a big Conservative supporter. Was it a mistake of John Major to privatise the rail in the first place?
I wasn't alive back then, Mark. I can't remember.
It's not your responsibility.
I can't remember what it was like before that.
It's like slavery. You weren't there. Not my problem. I mean, look, I don't know, because, I mean, what people forget, Liz, don't they, is that British Rail was terrible. It was costing the taxpayer millions of pounds a week, and the sandwiches were disgusting and inedible.
The toilets were...
They were unimaginable, weren't they? They were like a kind of French cafe toilet, just a hole in the ground, basically. And the fares, I mean, the only good thing you can say, the fares were lower, but British Rail is not a great template, is it?
No, I mean, I was thinking about this question earlier when I knew my colleagues were tonight, and as you said, if you don't know what it was like on British Rail, then perhaps they should run some trains in that style so young people can experience it.
Like a retro train. It was terrible, wasn't it? It was a terrible service.
It was terrible, and when it was privatised on where I live, I'm served by the North West Coast line, main line, and
where are you based? Where are you?
The nearest station is Milton Keynes.
Right.
So it was taken over by Virgin and immediately transformed. It was a bit old fur coat and no knickers with Richard Branson. You know, it was all red cashmere coats and red lipstick and people greeting on the part. But the trains were all suddenly brand new. They were clean. They ran on time, and it's been taken over by Avanti trains now. But the pricing is still fantastic. So I do notice it as I go around the country, the discrepancies in pricing. I think how much South Eastern trains in Kent, where I've come from tonight, it's 30-odd quid with a senior rail card for the journey that I can make from Milton Keynes to London for £14 at the same time of day. So that you can't reconcile that, can you? But I do think it's a vanity project to renationalise it. You're right. There's no competition locally, mainly. There is actually on the West Coast Main Line. And I think that probably has a good effect on it. But when people are having to be kept on the toes to keep the franchise, I think it does count. The passenger, when they took the franchise off Virgin 2 or 3 years ago, the passengers were outraged because we loved the service.
That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Zoe, the problem with going back in public hands is that we, the taxpayer, are on the hook for all that investment, all that rolling stock, all those liabilities.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think on a sort of moral, ethical level, I feel like trains, as public goods, they should be handled by the state so that the money invested in them doesn't go to shareholders, doesn't line the pockets of shareholders.
Because it's about 33 billion, isn't it, since privatisation, which is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and I feel like, you know, we know that in this country we have very old tracks. You know, we don't really have the infrastructure to support our modern needs. And when the money is going into shareholders' pockets rather than going back and investing in the service, I feel like that is problematic. Looking at Labour's plans, you know, I can see why they don't fill people with confidence or, you know, inspiration, because it doesn't look like it's going to make tickets cheaper. That's one of the main concerns. You know, you have concerns about what rail nationalisation used to look like. I mean, I do hope that modern governments can learn from the mistakes of past governments. I think that's something we would hope for. But I do feel like it is a step in the right direction. The biggest problem is we do need investment in the infrastructure in this country. We need more investment in our railways, because what we have at the minute is a very crowded system where if something goes wrong, it's very expensive to fix because all our services need to go on the same tracks. So I think there's more work that needs to be done.
It will cost billions. There's definitely arguments for rail nationalisation, but what about the issue of class, OK, and where people are on the economic ladder? Because there's an argument that this is a big investment that will benefit middle-class professionals, and actually a lot of working-class people, people on low incomes, never get on a train and won't benefit.
Well, that's why I'd also like to see investment in bus services.
Buses, yeah.
I mean, loads of people use buses. Buses are absolutely vital to rural communities. You know, they're vital for people who get to work. They're often vital for women with.
But don't you get a bit dizzy and sick on the bus? I find
I get
the diesel engine.
Yeah, I do get terribly sick.
Oh man! And then upstairs, I get beaten up by teenagers. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of the transport in our country is not great. It needs investment, and that's why I think it's right that it's done by the state and not private shareholders who want to make a profit.
Well, I think we can all agree that we definitely need better infrastructure. Are we going to get it? Let's hope Labour can deliver. So, folks, this is our next topic, should we give up our pets to save the planet? Zoe?
No. I think we should save the planet, but I think there are so many benefits to having pets. You know, I've got a cat. I love her.
Well, I think we might actually have some footage of your cat. Your cat is called?
Peaches.
Peaches. Peaches coming in a minute. We're keeping
okay, all right. I'll keep you on your toes.
Is that a boy or a girl?
She's a girl. And
Good.
She's lovely. And, you know, there's so many proven benefits to having pets for companionship, mental health.
There's Peaches.
Look how lovely she is.
How old is she?
I'm not going to give her up. 2 and a bit years.
All right. And does she have any quirks?
No, because she's a bit rubbish, really.
Does she like the Stranglers?
Exactly.
But, you know, look, there are plenty of things we can all do in our lives to reduce our environmental impact, to think more kind of cautiously about what we're doing, what we're consuming. And, you know, we can implement that into all our practices. But no, I don't think... I mean, what are we suggesting? Mass euthanisation of our pets?
Well, I just wonder whether it's about discouraging future pet ownership. I don't think the government's going to come and collect your moggy. But the bottom line is that they eat a lot of meat products, don't they? And so that would be an environmental impact, a carbon footprint, and then they obviously mess on the pavement. Cats go out and kill wildlife.
Mine doesn't. Mine's an indoor cat.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, by the way, there was a campaign in Canada to stop cats actually leaving the house, making all cats in Canada house cats, but there was a bit of an uproar about that. But if we're going to be really honest about environmental impacts, you know, pets are not great for the planet.
No, but humans aren't great for the planet either. And do you know what's really not great for the planet? Are big corporations that don't properly look after the environment. So I think we need to start with those big corporations. We do also all have things we can implement into our daily lives. You know, we can recycle, we can walk, we can cycle, all those things. But, you know, I think how much our pets eat and what they do is probably bottom of that list of priorities, really.
Yeah, I mean, this was a story that was floating around in The Guardian a year ago, Chloe, but it went viral this week. Someone got a hold of it and was very triggered. I do think at some point the sort of net zero enthusiasts will get round to our pets, don't you?
I mean, I think it would be a pretty unpopular policy if they started, you know, mass euthanising pets. If people want to do their bit for the planet by not having a pet because it's something that's not that important for them, then fine. Some people will decide that they don't want to have children because they're concerned about the comfort. But for people... You know, I always just think, you know, if you're trying to save the planet or whatever it is you're trying to do and you want to change people's behaviour, change the behaviours where there's, like, the least friction for them. Asking someone to give up their pet and never have a pet again if it's something that's absolutely dear to them, I'm sorry, but you're not going to get people to do that. I mean, my dog, he is my world. I cannot imagine a life without him.
What's he called?
Brody.
Brody, nice name.
And, you know, as a, you know...
What is he?
He's a Cocker Spaniel, he's crazy. And, you know, as a single woman living by myself, when you don't have people to come back to in the evening, I mean, you know, the love and affection he gives you is just amazing. And, you know, when I go out at night, I'm not worried about murderers and rapists coming for me. The thing I'm worried about is if someone steals my dog. I hold him dear to me, so I can't imagine anything worse in the world than someone taking my dog away from me. So there's no way. Like I don't eat meat, but my dog does. I'm not willing.
What does Brody make of the occasional male visitor? Does he growl at them?
Sorry, there are no male. I'm a nun, basically.
I'll believe you.
Is it on, Mark?
We go from a nun. We'll go from a nun to quite the opposite. Liz Kershaw, how are you?
Yeah, I don't have a pet. I don't run out. It's going down the same path as inheritance tax on farmers, so they'll have to sell the land and put solar panels on. I'm just bigging up this conspiracy theory now. And now we get rid of pets, and then we don't need as much meat, and then we don't need as much grain to feed the cows and the meat, and so it goes on. But in Jersey, where I was last summer, this is what the Germans did on the first day after they invaded. They asked everybody on the island to take their pets down to the quayside at gunpoint. Nobody knew why, and the Germans exterminated 6,000 cats and dogs on the first night.
That's terrible. Why?
That's the extreme.
What was the logic behind that?
Because it would mean that there was less food going to the animals, and there was more food production going to the invaded.
Crazy. Well, listen, let me reassure you, I don't think Ed Miliband is going to go that far.
You know that pets are banned in North Korea, I think, because it's seen as Western, and they have taken people's dogs and cats and executed them.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What a jolly conversation, I tell you. It's a barrel of laughs with pundits tonight, isn't it? Listen, folks, we've got so much more to come. Does the political and economic chaos in France and Germany prove that we're lucky to be out of the EU? And were the conspiracy theorists right all along about COVID? And would we have been better off doing nothing? We'll debate that next.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Storm Dara is expected to bring heavy outbreaks of rain and some severe gales at times as we head into the weekend. Hail snow too for Scotland, and there are multiple Met Office warnings in force, so do stay up to date on our website for those. This is Storm Dara here out to the west, bringing in heavy outbreaks of rain alongside these frontal systems and a good squeeze in the Isobars, so very strong winds at times across the bulk of the country, particularly around western coasts. These outbreaks of rain are set to continue overnight, still falling as snow across high ground in Scotland, and we're really going to see those winds strengthen in western areas overnight too, particularly in western parts of Wales, where we do have a red Met Office wind warning in force too. We could see gusts here reaching around 80 to 90 miles per hour. So for the start of Saturday then, it's going to be a very wet start across a lot of the country. Scotland seeing outbreaks of rain, still some hill snow across higher ground as well. And similar across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland, heavy outbreaks of rain and very strong winds, particularly around coastal areas, but even inland areas seeing some very strong gusts at times. Western parts of Wales likely to see severe gales here at times, making very difficult driving conditions. And on the whole, through Saturday, there is likely to be disruption as a result of the storm. The heavy outbreaks of rain continuing. Still a very windy day across a large portion of the country, particularly around western coasts. And looking at the temperatures too later on, we can see highs generally between 9 to 10 Celsius, but in those very, very strong winds as well, that's really going to add on to the wind chill. So it is going to feel a very chilly day, particularly under the rain and in those strong winds. Through into Sunday, we do start to see the weather settle down slightly. We do have some outbreaks of rain still, particularly in eastern areas, a few showers feeding into eastern parts of Scotland. The best of the weather, or the driest and brightest of the weather across Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. But it's still going to be a very blustery day on offer, and we won't really see more settled conditions until we head into next week. Bye for now.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the